we get to the bottom. And Mr. Speaker, before I finish on the last statement by the Meru County, I would also want to request your office to speed up on the reports from these committees, so that some of these issues that have been raised, either through statement or through motion, we can be able to get the immediate answers. As I conclude on the issue of one gentleman, Daniel Bernard alias Sniper. This is a young man, Mr. Speaker. The Kenya Kwanza government has put strategies of content creation. And that is why during the finance bill, we looked at the taxation levels, and this was really lowered so that we can be able to encourage them to make a living, to earn something. And it is sad if, through our political issues, then different young people coming up with their content creation to earn a living can be subjected to death. And sadly, Mr. Speaker, further to that, you realize that justice has not been served. The body of one sniper is still lying in the morgue. As a woman with a husband, Mr. Speaker, how do you feel? How do you sleep? How do you eat? How do you drink? How do you socialize? When your man, when your spouse is lying in the morgue, simply because you await justice, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the wife of one sniper, it is the high time, Mr. Speaker, that this statement from Meru County, you should stamp your stamp of urgency, so that the committee that will be assigned to undertake this issue, this house fully, needs a quick feedback, because children are crying somewhere. A woman is hurt somewhere. And this issue is still pending, Mr. Speaker. We are still awaiting as Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, because if we do not stop this, Mr. Speaker, then what happens to the others that we are still encouraging them when they're out there? With those many and few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support.
Senator Majayo.
Asante Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, nataka kuunga mkono hii taarifa iliyoletwa na ndugu yangu seneta wa Meru, hususan kushikwa kwa huyu sniper. Bwana Spika, si kushikwa peke yake, bali kutolewa ndani ya nyumba na kupelekwa na watu ambao hawajui, wamejitambulisha tu kwa familia na yeye mwenyewe, na kuenda naye kumtia kwa gari na kupotea naye. Bwana Spika, vitendo kama hivi vimetendeka sana na vimefanywa katika mikono ya polisi. Watu wanakuja kwa nyumba wakishajitambulisha kwamba wao ni mapolisi, wanatoa mpaka vitambulisho na wanabeba mtu, wanaenda naye, na hatimaye tunaona kwamba huyu mtu anapatikana ametupwa mahali fulani baada ya masiku fulani akiwa amekufa. Bwana Spika, tabia kama hizi ambazo zinatendeka hivi sasa tunaona vimeanza kuzidi, kwa sababu si Meru tu kitendo kama hichi kimetokea kwa mwandishi wa habari katika mambo ya mitandao, ama wanaitwa blogger. Mabloga wengi sana katika nchi hii pia kujipata katika hizi njia panda. Lakini kwa bahati mbaya, na ni pole sana kwa watu wa Meru, shemegi yangu pale Deputy Speaker, pole sana kwa kumpoteza bloga wenu, lakini hiyo imetendeka sasa kila mahali katika nchi. Hata upande wa pwani, ukifika Mombasa, kuna bloga kule Mombasa ambaye anajulikana sana. Lakini utapata ya kwamba polisi walienda kwake nyumbani. Jina la huyo anaitwa Muhammad, anaitwa Yusuf, limentoka, anaitwa Yusuf. Yusuf alichukuliwa kwao nyumbani, Bwana Spika. Alichukuliwa kwao nyumbani na watu waliojitambulisha kwa familia yake kama maaskari ama mapolisi. Na hatimaye baada ya masiku fulani kwenda naye, alipatikana katika hali ambayo ilikuwa si sawa sawa. Alikuwa amepigwa risasi na ameuawa. Bwana Spika, ikiwa hawa watu wamekuja ndani ya nyumba na wametambulisha mapolisi, sasa itabidi sasa tuanze kukataa na wapendwa wetu, ili tusiwaruhusu waende nao, kwa sababu tunajua wakienda nao mwishowe tutawapata miili ya wapendwa wetu katika vichaka, wapatikane ama wasipatikane. Tabia kama hizi, Bwana Spika, zimekuwa zikitendeka sasa kwa muda mfupi baada ya muda mfupi. Kwa hiyo tunasema kwa njia ambayo inatakana kufanyika ni kwamba polisi wakome kuweza kupoteza binadamu ama kupoteza Wakenya ambao tunajua kabisa ya kwamba kunazo sheria. Wakishika watu lazima wapeleke kotini, waende ashtakiwe, alafu mahakama ichukue mkondo wake. Akipatikana na hatia iweze kuchukuliwa hiyo hatua hiyo. Tunaona hata kuna mwingine pia alipatikana na hatia, kama yule alifungwa juzi, alikaambiwa atakwenda kunyongwa. Lakini hayo ni mambo baada ya kwamba koti imeweza kumsikiza yule mtu. Kwa hiyo sisi tu nikusema kwamba ulaghai ama kuchukua sheria katika mikono yao mapolisi, hali hii iweze kupingwa kwa hali ya juu sana. Na sisi kama maseneta hapa hatutakubali Wakenya waweze kupoteza maisha yao kupitia kwa mikono ya polisi ambao wamechukua hatua ya kuangamiza Wakenya kwa kuwapiga risasi ama kuwatoa katika nyumba zao bila sheria ambayo inaambatana na kuwapata hatimaye wamekufa. Asante Bwana Spika.
Senator Chute.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Let me take this opportunity first and foremost to send my condolences to the students, 11 students from Kenyatta University who died in road accident. Honorable Speaker, according to NTSA, the number of people who died in 2023 are 4,324, and the injuries were 18,561. Honorable Speaker, these accidents are mainly due to our own issues. First is fatigue. We have got also speeding, drunk driving, running red lights, distracted driving, and weather conditions. Honorable Speaker, all these are avoidable, something that can be avoided. NTSA also estimates about 3,000 deaths. The estimates about 3,000 deaths every year. And this is also contributing to, it's costing the country anywhere between 3 to 5% of gross domestic product. Honorable Speaker, 83% of the fatalities are mainly men. And Honorable Speaker, these are individuals aged between 30 to 34. And this is also contributing to us losing very young people in this country. Honorable Speaker, the roads that we have in Kenya, the most roads that are prone to accidents are, one is Northern Bypass, Kangundo Road, Mombasa Road, Outer Ring Road, and Thika Superhighway. These are the roads that are creating a lot of passengers on that road, and also speeding occurs on those roads. Honorable Speaker, can this accident be avoided? Yes, it can be avoided. The main causes are drunk driving. If we control our drivers, like today what the CSR said, he says he wants to introduce some laws to curb those drivers, specifically the drunk drivers and fatigues. This is what Honorable from Kisii was talking about. And fatigue is a major issue. Honorable Speaker, traveling from Moyale, buses traveling from Moyale to Nairobi is about 10 hours. and the same bus is going back again after 2 hours, the same driver. So that is a situation where you find fatigue goes into the accident issues. I think, Honorable Speaker, finally what I would say is this. We need to wear our safety belts. We have to driving on it saves lives, of course, avoiding overcrowding in the matatus. Like today, what the CS was talking about, Honorable Speaker, is the accident on the matatu about 2 weeks ago. The matatu was carrying 24 passengers, 10 more passengers than the normal required passengers, which are 14 passenger seats. Overcrowding is an issue also. Crossing the road for pedestrians, crossing the zebra line without taking care of cars coming in. And I think if we avoid drink driving, Honorable Speaker, that will also help a lot. Finally, Honorable Speaker, if you can remember, we had Michuki loss, and that time things were better than today. I think what the CS was talking about this morning, I really congratulate him and also thank him for start thinking of even amending those laws. Those laws amended, I think the rates will go down, and that is what must happen. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Sandy.
Honorable Senators, there are a few other senators who would like to maybe make a comment. So I'll guide that we do it maybe 2 minutes so that all these warriors can get a chance. Because I can see some of them were trained even in the morning and did not get a chance. Let's go to Sengo Karunda Beth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to add my voice to what my colleagues have said. I'll start by supporting your statement about Meru, the abduction, the killing of Daniel Mudhiani, alias Sniper. Mr. Speaker, it breaks my heart as a mother of sons to see that our children, our young men, who are creating employment for themselves by content creation and becoming bloggers, being abducted and killed, and no serious immediate action is taken. Mr. Speaker, they say justice delayed is justice denied. Why has it taken so long for this matter to be concluded and for those who perpetrated this to be brought to book? Why is it taking too long? It is a process that has happened elsewhere and conclusion is done. Why is it that when it comes to Meru, it is taking too long? Mr. Speaker, for me, it is really concerning me to see that Meru is on the spot for always wrong things. We had the governor for Meru twice in this house for wrong things. And now we are discussing about Meru because of justice delayed about Sniper. Mr. Speaker, I would urge the Ministry for Interior and our friend, Honorable Kindiki, is a neighbor to Meru County, that he makes sure action is taken immediately, the perpetrators are brought to book, and justice is served for the family, the wife, the parents, the relatives, and the friends of Daniel Mudhiani, alias Sniper. Mr. Speaker, if we allow as a house this to continue, we don't know who is next. We don't know who other young man is going to be taken, killed, and things are just put and swept under the carpet. We need quick action to bring this issue to conclusion. Mr. Speaker, allow me again also to comment on the issue of accidents on our roads. A statement that was brought by the Senator from Mombasa County. It is of great concern that in our roads there is a lot of disorder, Mr. Speaker. especially the menace brought by border operators. I would say call them rogue operators of border. The accidents that are happening mainly could be because of drunk drivers, fatigued drivers, maybe drivers who could have even bought their driving licenses, and others who go to shoddy driving schools that are run in this country. Mr. Speaker, we need some order. I'll call on the NTSA to move with speed as well, to check and call the drivers in this country to order by even doing strict following of their licenses. And even if drivers require refresher courses, that to be done to ensure that we curb several accidents. Mr. Speaker, other cause of these accidents could be the state of the roads. It could be because of our discipline on the roads. Mr. Speaker, it is important for action to be taken to ensure that we save lives in this country and we don't lose young lives like what happened about the 11 students of Kenyatta University. I pass my condolences to the bereaved families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mohamed Abdalla Shakila.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipatia hii fursa na mimi kuchangia kidogo katika hoja ya ajali za barabara. Mheshimiwa Spika, ajali za barabara zinaweza kupunguzwa ikiwa sheria itafuatwa kikamilifu. Sheria ya kwanza ambayo haifuatwi kikamilifu ni ufungaji wa mishipi kwenye magari. Utakuta watu wanadharau sana hilo jambo, na ni jambo ambalo linaweza kuokoa maisha. Na ni muhimu sana hizo.
Senator Shakila, what is
Nimemaliza.
Just no wait, just a moment. Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nikubalia nitumie Kiswahili tafadhali. Nataka kumuuliza kupitia kwako Senator Shakila kama anazungumzia sharia ama sheria. Manake Bwana Speaker, sharia ni sheria ya Kiislamu. Je, anazungumzia sharia ama sheria? Asante Bwana Speaker.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika, sharia na sheria hazina tofauti, ni ulimi wako vile unapenda kuongea. Ukitaka kuongea sheria ama sheria inamaanisha hivyo yote kawaida. Sawa, kwa hivyo ukitaka kujua zaidi nione nyuma ya tenti nikufunze mengi. Mheshimiwa Spika, pia ajali zingine utakuta nchi kama Rwanda, bodaboda inabeba mtu mmoja na wote wanavaa helmet. Lakini hapa Kenya bodaboda inabeba watu 4 5 na wakianguka wanafariki wote. Hawafuati sheria za kuvaa zile makofia ambao zinachunga maisha ikiwa umepata ajali. Kwa hivyo pia enforcement ya law ni muhimu sana itekelezwe ili hii ajali za barabara zipunguzwe. Matrafiki barabarani unakuta wanachukua mahongo. Anakwambia tu akikuta scratch kwa gari yako, hii gari mbona imekwaruzwa hapa, toa kitu kidogo. Lakini hawawezi kuelewa kwamba hii gari pengine iko na shida, na ni njia gani serikali itaweka kuhakikisha kwamba magari yanayotembea barabarani ni ya salama na yako sawa na yako safe. Kwa sababu utakuta magari mabovu yanatembea barabarani na ndio yanayoleta maajali. Gari linaenda bila breki, gari linaenda.
Senator Shakila Abdalla, sijui.
Na nina mengi Mheshimiwa, ningetaka kuchangia hizo hoja zingine zote, maana mambo
na yeye ako na haki
ya mazingira pia ni mambo mabaya.
Sijui ni jambo gani angependa kujua zaidi kwako.
Kiswahili tu.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the standing orders does not exist in futility or in vain. Standing order number 98, I have seen repeatedly my sister, Senator Shakila, repeating by saying, nyuma ya tent, yuko safe. I thought in our standing orders, if you have insisted on using either Kiswahili, like Ledama did today in the morning, or use English, is it in order to interchangeably use the words? Yet our standing orders state that if you start with English, you use with English. If you start with Kiswahili, you proceed with Kiswahili. Is it in order for her to proceed that way?
Tenti kwa Kiswahili ni tenti bwana
Endelea umalize.
Speaker. Tenti kwa Kiswahili ni tent. Ningependa also pia kuchangia juu ya NEMA. NEMA wa mambo ya mazingira. Mazingira ni kitu muhimu sana, Mheshimiwa Spika. Tunaelewa uharibifu wa mazingira unaleta magonjwa na unaleta mambo mengi ambayo kwamba ni hasara kwa binadamu. Lakini unakuta NEMA wako na tabia ya kutoa leseni kiholela bila kufikiria mikakati ambayo ingewekwa kudhibiti zile madhara ambayo angeletwa na ule mradi ambao unakuja kuletwa. Hatukatai miradi kwenye nchi, hatukatai wawekezaji, lakini tunasema NEMA iwajibike kuthibitisha kwamba ikiwa watatoa leseni kwa mradi wowote, wahakikishe pia wameweka mipango ya kuzuia athari na ajali za ule mradi ambao utakuja kuletwa ile sehemu ambao kwamba utadhuru wale watu ambao wanaishi kwenye sehemu hizo, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hayo machache, Mheshimiwa Spika, nashukuru sana kwa muda huu mfupi na nasema asante.
Asante sana, lakini naomba pia nikueleze NEMA ni halmashauri ya utunzi wa mazingira ya Kenya. Halmashauri. Senator Joe Nyutu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Senator for Nairobi wants to raise a point of order against me even before I've started. But Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to first also pass my condolences and empathy to the students of Kenyatta University who lost their lives in that very bad accident. Mr. Speaker, it is very sad that this happened, Mr. Speaker. And probably it's time to ask ourselves whether the drivers of these institutional buses, whether when we are making long distance trips, whether they should be the same drivers that take students to those long distance trips, because, Mr. Speaker, these may be people that are not used to driving for long distances. So even as we sympathize with the situation, this is something that we need to think about, Mr. Speaker. We also need to think about the state of our roads, because sometimes some accidents can be avoided if we have a better state of our roads, Mr. Speaker. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, to comment on the statement that you raised as in your capacity as the Senator for Meru. Mr. Speaker, the death or the murder of a sniper is something that caught the whole country's attention, Mr. Speaker, because of the way this young man was killed and the way his body also was found. Mr. Speaker, if my memory serves me well, the body had been disfigured, I think, using some acids, Mr. Speaker, and this was very sad. Mr. Speaker, the police must act. We pride in having the best investigative police service, Mr. Speaker. And so I just want to believe and hope that the police have not been compromised, because by now the killers, the perpetrators of this injustice should have been brought to book so far, Mr. Speaker. And the police must redeem their image, Mr. Speaker, in this particular matter, because it's a very serious and sad happening that should not happen. Mr. Speaker, we are politicians. Young men and women every morning will critique us. They will condemn us. They will even peddle half-truths and falsehoods against us every morning on social media, Mr. Speaker. But we must learn to live. And I'm not trying to presume that Sniper was killed by a politician. But Mr. Speaker, having been a blogger, it is very likely that this death was caused by a politician, Mr. Speaker. So we must learn that when we offer ourselves to serve the public, that then we expose ourselves and the people can say anything that they want to say against us, Mr. Speaker, and we must develop thick skins that anybody can say anything. The last thing that any person should think about is eliminating a young man or woman simply because they criticize them on social media, Mr. Speaker. And this is something that everybody that offers themselves for public service must learn, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in your statement, you also talked about harassment and intimidation against journalists and anybody, Mr. Speaker, that does bring information to the public. Mr. Speaker, I want to support that statement because everybody must be given their right to report whatever they want to report, Mr. Speaker. And if anybody has a problem, they should go to court and seek legal redress, Mr. Speaker. I say this because some of us also have been intimidated. Some of us may have said things that are not very kind to some people who are senior, maybe in government. And Mr. Speaker, when we speak our minds, we must also be protected as politicians. Because if I rise and say that I stand up against intimidation, I stand up against open hatred, I stand up against disrespect, Mr. Speaker, by whoever it is in authority in this land or even out of this land, Mr. Speaker, I should be protected. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say that some of us also feel threatened because of the utterances that we have made against some people in powerful offices, Mr. Speaker. And that is why we must say, without mincing words, that people must be protected, that the law must protect us, that, Mr. Speaker, we have the freedom of expression. If you are mighty, if you are powerful, and I stand up against you, you can do whatever you want, but Mr. Speaker, you must not harm me. Mr. Speaker, isolate me if you want to. Mr. Speaker, do whatever you do, but you must, the government must make sure that we are safe and should not be intimidated, harassed, or anything, Mr. Speaker. And I say that because there are senators here who are asking me why I'm not in my county today, because everybody thought I should be in the county. But I stand here, Mr. Speaker, to say I have my right as a Kenyan, and I should not be intimidated by anybody. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I want to comment on the statement also that was raised by Senator Mazayo, the majority leader, Mr. Speaker, about environmental degradation in his county, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we come from places also where we have quarries in Murang'a County. And sometimes people who mine these stones, Mr. Speaker, building stones, leave, big depressions uncovered after the whole of it. And when the rains come, Mr. Speaker, sometimes floods fill in these big depressions. And when sometimes children play around there, or when one or two people takes what whispers used to call Jeremiah's waters, Mr. Speaker, sometimes they fall into these depressions and fall there and losing their lives, Mr. Speaker. And so we must all, in one accord, agree and advise that anybody who does the mining must manage these sites, especially after they leave, Mr. Speaker, in order for us to continue assuring our people of their safety, Mr. Speaker. Pollution is something that we must come against. That when these mining, any activities that are done by these people, these miners, these companies, Mr. Speaker, they must see to it that pollution is prevented. And Mr. Speaker, corporate social responsibility, CSR, must also be looked into. Let them build schools, let them build hospitals, health centers, Mr. Speaker, so that the people that live in these areas can be able also to benefit from these activities, Mr. Speaker. They must benefit economically, financially, Mr. Speaker, because that is the right thing to happen. Mr. Speaker, I support these statements. Thank you very much.
Senator Nyutu, I wish you stopped at the time you were at the high note, then you conclude at that time. Senator Mwinyi Haji Mohammed.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika.
And kindly, I did beg you to reduce your time, at least 2 minutes, because I've only 4 remaining. So just two minutes, then
Four remaining.
we go to other business.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Because you have exhausted the statement.
Yeah, mine will be very brief, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ningependa kuchangia taarifa ambayo umeileta hapa bungeni kama seneta wa Meru kutokana na kutekwa nyara na bahatimaye kuuawa kwa mwana blogger sniper. Mheshimiwa Spika, ni jambo la kusikitisha kwamba hivi sasa ambapo tuna serikali ya Kenya Kwanza mpya, bado watu wanauliwa kiholela. Mheshimiwa Spika, hili jambo la kuua watu kiholela limekuwa likitokea na serikali zilizopita, lakini mpaka sasa donda sugu hili halijaweza kutibiwa na wananchi wa Kenya wakaishi kwa amani kama inavyosema katiba. Mheshimiwa Spika, majuzi pia kuna mtu mmoja mjini Mombasa ambaye alikuwa kwa jina anaitwa Yusuf Swale Ahmed Kandereni ama Kandi Rain. Mheshimiwa Spika, huyu alikuwa ni mfanyabiashara Mombasa na alitekwa nyara na polisi nyumbani kwake na akapotea. Baada ya siku 8 maiti yake ikapatikana sehemu inaitwa Kuruitu katika kaunti ya Kilifi ambapo alikuwa amepoteza maisha yake. Mheshimiwa Spika, habari zilizoko Mheshimiwa Spika ni kwamba alitekwa nyara na polisi na akauliwa kwa tuhuma kwamba alikuwa ni mmoja katika wale ambao wanauza mihadharati. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, ni wazi kwamba nchi yetu ya Kenya kuna mahakama ambazo zina uwezo wa kufanya kesi yoyote katika nchi. Mheshimiwa Spika, je, ni sawa Mheshimiwa Spika kwamba polisi mpaka sasa hawajaweza kutoa taarifa yoyote kuhusiana na tuhuma hizo kwamba walihusika katika mauaji ya Kandereni ama Kandi Rain? Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, ni wazi kuwa kunyamaza kwa polisi ni kwamba wanajua kwamba ni kitu gani ambacho walikuwa wanafanya, na hii ni kuendelea kwa mauaji ya kiholela Mheshimiwa Spika, ambayo serikali hii ilikuwa imesema kwamba itakuwa ni jambo la kusahau. Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii.
Asante sana. Senator Recha Julius Mulko.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to also contribute to the reports and statements. First of all, I would like to to comment on this one of the accidents on the road. And as my colleagues have shared, I also send my condolences to the families and friends of the students who died. And Mr. Speaker, I think it is something that somebody has to make a decision to stop this menace once for all. When Michuki decided to go singularly against it as a minister then, people thought he was crazy or something because he really went very firm about it and against all the menace that we see every day. And so some of the accidents are caused by mechanical problems that are on the vehicles that are not serviced, and people are not careful what they drive. And then secondly, for institutions such as schools, I think it is time that it should be required that when schools are making long trips, they have to have 2 drivers, one to take the students to where they are going, and another to drive them back, so that they go safely and come back safely. Because long trips, definitely somebody will have fatigue, and somebody will be tired, somebody will be sleepy, and so on. And so it should be made mandatory that 2 drivers have to be there. I know that schools are very careful about finances and so on, but there are other ways that they misuse finances, and so to use finances on safety is the best thing that they ever have in schools. And then on the environment,
I think the law should be affirmed very firmly and enforced so that everybody is conscious about environment. Simple things such as dropping papers and things like that on the road or even around compounds should be something that parents and schools and everybody should be made conscious so that there is a consciousness that you don't see such kind of things and just leave them behind you. Thank you, I support.
Thank you, Senator Olekina Redama.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa nafasi ili niweze kuchangia taarifa au kauli ambaye imeletwa na seneta kutoka Kilifi ambaye anahusu uchimbuaji wa madini katika eneo la Jaribuni, Kilifi County. Mheshimiwa Spika, uchimbuaji wa madini ni jambo ambalo linahitaji kuzingatiwa kwa umakini sana, au sivyo? Jambo hili ni jambo ambalo sisi kama Wakenya huwa hatuzingatii mazingira. Jambo hili ambayo tunazingatia sana ni uwekezaji. Inatubidi sasa tuweze kuangalia jambo ambalo linatukera sana, ni jambo ambayo sisi kama representative ama wakilishi wa Wakenya, sisi ndio ambaye kila mara tuwapigiwe simu, tuulizwe tuweze kutuma hela ili iweze kusaidia watu kuwapeleka hospitalini. Mheshimiwa Spika, ukisafiri sasa hivi kutoka Nairobi uelekee county ya Kilifi County, eneo la Jaribuni, utakuta ya kwamba hali ya afya ya Wakenya ambao wanaishi kule imezoroteka vibaya sana. Mheshimiwa Spika, kama ningeulizwa, na hivyo ndivyo ningependa kumshawishi mkuu ama minority leader, kiongozi walio wachache, angeleta hoja hapa ili tuweze kazi ile ambayo inaendelea huko iweze kusimama. Na huo mwekezaji wa hii ya kampuni ambayo inaitwa China U Company ingelazimika aweze kuacha uchumbuaji huo wa madini mpaka masuala ya kijamii yatakayoshughulikiwa. Mheshimiwa Spika, ni aibu sana tukiwa sisi kama Wakenya, ile jambo ambayo tunatilia maanani sana ni ile kuweza kufanya tuwe matajiri sana. Mwekezaji huyo amekuja huko, amechimbua madini, ametoa chuma, ameweza kuuza, amepata hela. Amewacha wananchi wale ambao wanaishi katika eneo hilo la Jaribuni wakiwa katika hospitalini. Wakienda katika hayo hospitali hawapati madawa. Kweli hii ni nchi gani ambayo tunatengeneza, Mheshimiwa Spika? Mheshimiwa Spika, hii ni jambo ambayo linanikera sana. Kwa sababu hata ukienda kule Narok, ukiteremuka mahali kunaitwa Siabei, kuna boma ya watoto ambaye hawana mafamilia yao wanaishi kule. Na chini yake kidogo kuna shimo kubwa ambaye iliwachwa na wale wawekezaji ambaye pia hao walikuwa wanachimbua madini, wanachimbua mchanga, wanachimbua mawe ya kutengeneza mabarabara. Ni siku gani sisi kama Wakenya, kama wakilishi wa Kenya tutakasirika tuweze kuwaweka Wakenya wetu mbele na hii maneno ya wawekezaji iwe ni kitu ambaye ni ya baadaye? Kweli Mheshimiwa Spika, itakuwa ni heri kweli tukuwa na wawekezaji wengi, lakini hatuna Wakenya ambaye wanaweza kuishi kuweza kufaidika na hiyo mambo ambaye hawa wawekezaji wanaleta. Leo hii Mheshimiwa Stewart Madzayo ameuliza jambo ambalo pia mimi ningependa kuuliza. Jambo la kuhusu majukumu ya shirika la kijamii au social corporate responsibility. Mara kwa wingi hata sisi hapa tukizungumza tunasema, tunajiuliza, je, hii majukumu ya kijamii ni yapi? hii kampuni ambaye inaitwa sijui China hii imeweza kusema ya kwamba hii ndio jukumu letu, tutahakikisha ya kwamba wananchi wa hapa wamepata matibabu wakigonjeka. Mheshimiwa Spika, uchimbuaji wa madini hasa chuma ama iron ore inawacha magonjwa mabaya sana. Hata ile ambaye ile pofu yake na ile ambaye inabaki wakishaosha kutoa ile chuma, ikianza kutiririka chini inapeleka magonjwa yote, inaleta saratani. Wananchi wote wa Kilifi wanaendelea kuangamia. Mheshimiwa Spika, hii ni jambo ambalo sasa kama seneti la Kenya ni lazima tujiulize, kweli ni haki? Kweli ni haki wananchi wa Kilifi waendelee kuangamia? Ukienda kule, Mheshimiwa Spika, nikimalizia, utakuta kweli wale wananchi ambao wanaishi kule hata saa zingine kuweza kupata chakula cha mchana ni shida. Sasa kama hawezi kupata chakula cha mchana, je, wakienda hospitali nani atawalipia?
Senator Rokina, ungependa kujulishwa na Senator Faki?
Kabisa, kwa sababu Kiswahili changu
amesema Mheshimiwa Olekina kuwa madini haya, lile vumbi linatoa athari mbalimbali kwa jamii. Mheshimiwa Spika, moja hizi athari, Mheshimiwa Spika, ni upungufu wa nguvu za kiume kwa watu wanaokaa sehemu zile. Mheshimiwa Spika, hii inatokamana, Mheshimiwa Spika, hata ukiangalia kuna hukumu ambayo ilitolewa kwa yale masala ya ile inaitwa kwa Kiingereza Mheshimiwa inaitwa nini, inatumika katika utengenezaji wa simiti. Mheshimiwa Spika, inachanganywa simiti, clinker. Ndio Mheshimiwa Spika, clinker. Mheshimiwa Spika, judgment iliyotolewa kwa pale wakazi wa Wino Uhuru Mombasa ni kwamba ilikuwa inaathiri uwezo wao wa kuweza kufanya tendo la ndoa na bibi zao. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa hivyo hii madini yanayochimbwa kule jaribuni, Mheshimiwa Spika, ni baadhi ya athari zake ni hizo. Asante.
Sasa wewe sehemu yako ya kuishi ni hapo hapo ama ni mbali kidogo kuliko?
Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi naishi sehemu za Nyali, katikati ya Nyali. Mheshimiwa Spika, athari hazijanifikia.
Sasa endelee umalize.
Mheshimiwa Spika, ningependa kumshukuru Mheshimiwa Seneta Faki ambaye ametilia maanani yale mambo ambaye anazungumzia hapa kuhusu afya wa Kenya. Je, itakuwa ni ungwana, Mheshimiwa Spika, ikiwa ukienda kule Ujaribuni, Kilifi County, Ujaribuni, unakuta ukijaribu kusimama hivi unahesabu wanaume ni kama 20 peke yake, lakini watoto ni mmoja, kwa sababu vile amesema hii vumbi inaharibu mbegu ya mwanaume. Mheshimiwa Spika, hiyo ni kitu ambaye inanikera sana, na ndivyo nasema ningemshawishi mwenzangu kiongozi walio wachache aweze kuleta hoja hapa katika bunge hili ili tuweze kuchunguza jambo hili. Si jambo la kuchezewa, Mheshimiwa Spika. Ukiona watoto ambayo wanakuwa vipofu, ukiona watoto ambaye wanakuwa wagonjwa, wazazi wao hawana hela ya kuwapeleka hospitali, je, tunakuwa kweli fair? How do you say fair in Swahili? Tunakuwa kweli fair? Kigezo. Kweli asante Mr. Speaker.
Senator William Kemoi Kisang, what is the experience in Elgeyo Marakwet?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, you know, there are some light moments this afternoon. So I want to comment on the road carnages, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, if you go to a country like Tanzania, our neighbor here, you know, people are very disciplined. If the speed limit is 50 kilometers per hour, you will see people observing the speed limit of 50 kilometers. If you must stop on the zebra crossing, people stop. So I don't know what is happening with our culture here, Honorable Speaker. When Michuki was the CS then, and he came up with some raft of measures, and we all obeyed. Speed governors were installed in vehicles. Safety belts were installed, but I don't know. These are things the CS for transport needs to go back and ensure that we go back to those old good days of Michigan, Honorable Speaker, because the accidents dropped drastically. It's unfortunate that we lost the other day 11 students from my former university, Kenyatta University. We lost a student and a driver from Kapsabet Boys. We lost other people in Sibilwet and other areas, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we need to reflect as a country. I think NTSA needs to sit down, come up with policies or revise the same policies, and those who flout the rules, let them face the law. Honorable Speaker, I was in Arusha recently, and you'll see a border rider having a helmet, one passenger, but here in Kenya, you'll see 6, 7 youth in one border, Honorable Speaker, and none of them has, even the rider himself doesn't have an helmet, Honorable Speaker. We need to change as a country so that we don't lose young lives, Honorable Speaker. On behalf of the people of Elgeyo County, I want to send my sincere condolences to all those who are bereaved during this difficult time. Honorable Speaker, I have an interest in Kilifi, and the senator for Kilifi has just walked out. I wanted to find out from him. I hope he has not been affected because of what Senator Faki has said. I hope he's still safe and doing his normal duties in the evening, Honorable Speaker, because I'm told the clinker is affecting the manhood, Honorable Speaker. Maybe that's the reason why in recent years, it looks like the population for Kilifi has stagnated. So that is, I agree with what Senator Olagina said. You need to bring up an inquiry so that you can inquire properly, because if people are given opportunity to do excavation or to mine, if it is maram, if it is gemstone or clinker, they are supposed to restore the environment the way they found it, including planting trees. Otherwise, if these people don't do that, then it means we should deny them licenses to do mining, to do all these things. Recently, we were in your place. There was a petition in this house on nuclear, because they also want to set up a nuclear power plant in Cliff, and the people are also complaining. So, Senator, we empathize with you, and I hope you're okay. You're still performing your duties. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Sifuna Edwin.
Mr. Speaker, very quickly on 3 statements. The first one on the mining that is happening in Kilifi. Mr. Speaker, my reading of Article 71 of the Constitution is that parliamentary ratification is a requirement for all these agreements that involve a grant of a right or concession by on behalf of any person, including the national government, to another person for the exploitation of any natural resource of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, therefore, one of the problems we have faced as representatives of the people is that sometimes these agreements are never brought to the attention of members of parliament so that we can put in place a mechanism to address some of the concerns that have been raised by the Senator for Kilifi. Number 2, Mr. Speaker, on the statement on accidents, we in Nairobi here just the other day had a very peculiar case of a matatu overturning on Haile Selassie Avenue. And people were asking, how is it possible to roll a matatu on Haile Selassie Avenue? And because all of you use Haile Selassie Avenue, there is something on Haile Selassie Avenue that never used to be there. A few months ago, Mr. Speaker, the Kenya Urban Roads Authority, for no reason whatsoever, decided to put bumps at the exit of the roundabout on Haile Selassie Avenue. This is a similar, we had a similar case on the Southern Bypass, that they just woke up one day and put road bumps. And the drivers, because they were not acclimatized, and if you know the bump I'm speaking about on Haile Selassie, Mr. Speaker, it is not your normal sized bump. So it is very possible that some of the decisions that are being taken by the road authorities are actually contributing to the accidents that we are seeing in the country. That could be preventable. And on that note, Mr. Speaker, allow me also to pass my condolences to the students of Kenyatta University following that accident. Finally, Mr. Speaker, on this freedom of speech, I am beginning to like this House. Ever since last week, Mr. Speaker, and the vote that was taken involving the matter from Kisii, I am starting to like this house because I have argued repeatedly that there is something called an objective truth. People in the opposition know that the sun rises from the east. And that should also be true for the people who support government or are elected from the government coalition. So, Mr. Speaker, I like when I hear Senator Nyutu speaking as passionately as he has this afternoon about freedom of speech. Mr. Speaker, let me just say that today, me together with Senator for Vihiga, we attended the funeral service of Dr. Chakava, who is a foremost publisher, Mr. Speaker, one of the people who founded the East African Publishers. And in his eulogy, Mr. Speaker, they told us that this was a person who had the courage to publish things in that era where publication of things against government could actually attract a death penalty for you. And Mr. Chakava, Mr. Speaker, was writing, publishing books by people like Ngugi wa Thiong'o at a time when we had sedition on our books, at a time when subversion was still a crime in this country, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Chakava himself, Dr. Chakava, we were told in his story, was one day followed by goons, presumably sent by government types. And they beat him up very badly, Mr. Speaker, and cut off one of his fingers. This is something that was happening way back in the 70s and 80s when we were under one-party rule. We will never allow ourselves to go back to that particular period in time. I have loved hearing the Senator for Kirinyaga saying, people who put themselves in public spaces must grow thick skin. That is exactly what I was trying to say yesterday, that in fact, even in this house, people who have had experience in politics of the types of the president doesn't need to be protected from hecklers, Mr. Speaker. So when I see the CS for Interior, instead of looking for the people who killed Sniper in Meru, he's going to look for the people who heckled the president in Bomet. Mr. Speaker, my reading and understanding of Article 33 puts only 3 limitations on the freedom of speech. And I can read them out here for record, Mr. Speaker. Number 1, freedom of speech does not extend to propaganda for war, incitement to violence, and advocacy for hatred. That is the only limitation on freedom of speech. You are allowed to boo public officials, Mr. Speaker. You are allowed to insult us. Personally, Mr. Speaker, immediately I got myself into public space. I grew a thick skin. I don't even block people who insult me on social media. I want to keep reading those insults every day so that I know that for as long as I am pissing off the people who are against the things that I say, I am on the right track. So, Mr. Speaker, we cannot be in a country where we are eliminating people for their political views because they have criticized you, because they don't like what you're saying, because they have opposing views. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to urge this House, and together with the Senator of Meru, I want to pledge my support. We want a speedy resolution to the murder of this young man, Mr. Speaker, because this is something that should not be happening in the kind of times that we live in today in this country. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator wa Nairobi. Last but not the least, Senator Manzo Daniel Kitonga. Sorry?
I had contributed on this one.
I'm
waiting on the next matter.
On the statements.
Yes, yes.
But I cannot see Senator Betty on my screen. No, not yet. Can you give her the mic, Senator Betty Motet?
Thank you for saving me, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me also very quickly add my voice on the 3 statements which have been brought to this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me start with your statement. I think it is very, very unfortunate that to date, the body of the late sniper has not been laid to rest. Mr. Speaker, sir, you can imagine the agony the family is going through. That since that young man was murdered, to date, he has not been put to rest. So that means his family cannot also settle having somebody in the mortuary. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would urge the Minister of Interior, coming from a neighboring county, to take this matter seriously. This is a matter we've had the Deputy President speak on, and Mr. Speaker, what I would kindly ask you as a leader from the same community, Please, let's stop politicizing this issue. The young man needs to be put to rest. And please, I urge the people of Meru, as we look for justice. Yes, I know justice delayed is justice denied. Let us please allow the body of the late sniper to be put to rest, and the people can start mourning. Because when the body is in the mortuary, I believe the family is not even able to mourn, leave alone to move forward. Very quickly, again, let me comment about the road carnage, Mr. Speaker, as I pass my condolences to the family and the fraternity of Kenyatta University, Kapsabet boys, and so many other accidents that we've had lately. Mr. Speaker, sir, what I know, all these problems we have is because we don't follow the law in this country. The laws have been made, very good laws. Some have been put into action, other are in the shelves. And Mr. Speaker, knowing the Minister for Transport in this country, the current Minister, Honorable Murkomen, our former senator, I know he's an able man. I trust that he can do it. If he just came out strongly and be our second savior, our second Michuki, Mr. Murkomen is an able CS, he's a hardworking man. We've seen him, we know him from this house. We used to hear him before some of us came to this house, and I know he's an able CS. If only he can put his foot down, this menace is going to be eliminated in this country. On environment, still, I would say still for people not following the law. Mr. Speaker, sir, when these big investors come to this country, I believe they are given all the conditions and the laws of this nation. And if followed clearly, if people stop following them for handouts, the law will be followed clearly, and all this mess we are seeing, all this environmental menace we are seeing in this country will stop, and things will move the correct way if Kenyans are to follow the law, and especially the people who are there to enforce the law. So if everybody did their jobs and did them well, I'm sure we'll not have all these problems. I support the statements, and thank you for giving me a chance.
Thank you. That's the end of that session. Let's go to the next order.
Order number 8, motion, report of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget on the 2024 medium-term debt management strategy. Resumption of debate interrupted on Tuesday, 19th March 2024.
Honorable Senators, Senator Endokech, and a balance of 12 minutes. So if you are ready, you proceed and consume your time, or if you are not, then we can give to any other senator interested to contribute. Senator Endokech.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was born ready. Mr. Speaker, just to perhaps, rekindle our minds about yesterday's conversation, we were talking about this particular motion that was moved by the committee that I sit in on how we can be able to deal with our debt in the country, Mr. Speaker. And I did allude to some conversations yesterday to do with physical consolidation, and I think that I want to dedicate my conversations around, as a country, how can we be able to start thinking about serious physical consolidation? The idea that what are these major drivers that are making us not to be able to come out of this debt menace in the country, Mr. Speaker? And just perhaps to redeem some of the areas that I did focus on yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the current physical deficit that we are looking at in these years, BPS that has been put forward, Mr. Speaker, is 703.9 billion. That is the money that the government is looking at in terms of trying to close that physical deficit that the government has. And Mr. Speaker, it has been proposed in this MTDS that 55% of that is going to be borrowed externally, and 45% is supposed to be borrowed domestically, Mr. Speaker. I've always held the view that domestic borrowing in whichever form, Mr. Speaker, as long as it goes to the ages of 25% and above, Mr. Speaker, it then brings the idea of crowding out, Mr. Speaker, where the government will be borrowing more at an advantage of businesses that are locally in the country than the businesses will be able to borrow in a commercial setting where commercial banks will find it more lucrative for them to be able to make quicker money and more stable, give more stable loans to the government than they would ordinarily to businesses, Mr. Speaker. I can attest to this, Mr. Speaker, in the sense that even the lower part of the pyramid, Mr. Speaker, that this current government has wanted to focus on in the narrative of hustlers, the hustler nation, Mr. Speaker. If you remember, last year, the central bank did give a report on the MSMEs landscape. This will be the micro businesses that we have in this country, small, medium enterprises that we have in this country, Mr. Speaker. And the challenge that we had in the entire last year, and I think it's a challenge that we're still going to face in this year, is that small and medium enterprises, for every money they borrow, about 10 shillings that they borrow, 6 shillings they end up defaulting. And why are they defaulting? Is because the capacity that they have in terms of being able to run a business is not there. And therefore, banks will be dissuaded even more when they realize that these small and medium enterprises cannot be able to borrow more predictably, and therefore they just become unbankable. So, Mr. Speaker, this is something that as a country, we must start thinking about how do we ensure that before even we get to the domestic borrowing and external borrowing conversations, we can be able to shrink and shrink and shrink the physical deficit in this country, Mr. Speaker. And some of these areas, Mr. Speaker, that I talked about very passionately about was which are the areas that are enticing capital for government to spend in, Mr. Speaker. I have held the view very strongly that if we are borrowing money, Mr. Speaker, and that money does not go to development. For instance, right now, we are ranging between 65 and 68% of our national budget going on recurrent budgets, whereby we are just financing a budget that is not a development budget, Mr. Speaker. If we continue borrowing as a country to be able to eat, to be able to buy Panadol for workforce, to be able to just consume, Mr. Speaker, we end up being in trouble. Another thing I wanted to say, Mr. Speaker, as I submit on this, is that I have been sitting in the committee of CPIC, that is County Public Investment and Special Funds Committee, Mr. Speaker. And in that committee, we have been able to observe a serious problem with regards to pending bills and with regards to consumptions that mirror the national level, Mr. Speaker. In fact, counties are facing a situation whereby if they don't learn from the conversations that we are having in this House on debt management strategy, Mr. Speaker, our counties are going to reach a point whereby the pending bills are going to be more in terms of nominal value than the equitable shares that they are getting, Mr. Speaker. We are going to wake up one day where our counties are going to find themselves with a lot of contract pressure from suppliers that need their money paid, because these suppliers that are in counties, Mr. Speaker, they come on the basis of a contract. And if there's one thing that the Constitution of Kenya protects and our laws protect, is contracts to investors, contracts to suppliers, and contracts to anybody who ends up getting into a dealing with any form of government, whether national government or county government, Mr. Speaker. And from where we are seeing ourselves heading as a country, Mr. Speaker, the counties must start learning from this MTDS conversation in the Senate and in Parliament in general, because counties are facing a serious challenge in terms of their own physical consolidation, Mr. Speaker. Just to give you a perspective, Mr. Speaker, if you look at where the counties are spending currently, like on domestic travel and subsistence, Mr. Speaker, on such things as hospitality, expenditure in counties, Mr. Speaker, these areas are gobbling a lot of money from counties to the extent that the expenditure in some of these areas could be used to be able to pay some of the pending bills. And we know, Mr. Speaker, that in the national government, as we try to raise money, the ordinary revenue, as we try to raise money from different Eurobonds, and as we try to raise money even from grants from external sources, Mr. Speaker, the first charge for the government has been always nationally paying for this debt. In fact, I remember last year, Mr. Speaker, there were some weeks that the national government was paying a whooping 100 billion per week in debt. Now, our counties are going to start facing a situation whereby they are going to start paying the first charge of their money to suppliers in terms of pending bills, Mr. Speaker. And rightfully so, because if we do not have counties and national government paying our suppliers, Mr. Speaker, the common people in this country who are working day and night to be able to supply goods and services to our government, Mr. Speaker, we are killing this economy. We are killing it because without being able to guarantee payments to these suppliers, without being able to guarantee payments to young people in this country, Mr. Speaker, that are working to be able to supply goods and services to government, then there is no enterprising economy that can be able to go on, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, this conversation should be larger. The idea of physical consolidation should be a larger conversation that we are having, both at the county level and at the national level, because otherwise, that is what ends up bringing a pressure on the national government to keep on adding taxes that sometimes do not make sense in whichever way you think about it. Even the pressure about housing bill that we had here, Mr. Speaker, is all the effort that the government wanted to see how they can be able to solve the housing equation in an area that they don't have their own money to be able to put, to be able to solve the issue of housing, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, you end up forcing the common mwananchi to go and put their money into this fund because you cannot raise it by yourself. And then it ends up being a tax that's additional to the burden that the mwananchi already has. And Mr. Speaker, if we do not solve this issue of expenditure in government, we are still going to have a problem in this debt management strategy. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, as I finish, I want to invite the House, Mr. Speaker, that we must start keeping the National Treasury to account in the data points that it has forwarded to this House with regards to shrinking that debt to GDP ratio. There is desire, of course, that by 2029, they are hoping to reduce it all the way to 55%, Mr. Speaker. They made a commitment of this formula, moving us from a numerical value last year to going to this ratio value, Mr. Speaker. But since last year up to now, Mr. Speaker, we haven't had an engagement, not at the committee level and not at the House level, where the ministry has come and given us quarterly data in terms of this is how we are going about it. This is the adjustments on our GDP index projections that we are seeing. And these are the kind of debts that we are taking in terms of concessionary debts that we are taking this particular month in such a way that we are sure that we are on track. That is why, Mr. Speaker, last year you saw that by the time we were closing December last year, Mr. Speaker, the debt to GDP ratio stood at a higher level than where we found it at 70%, Mr. Speaker, because there is no proper monitoring by this particular House. Therefore, I want to invite the House to pay a lot of attention to the National Treasury figures that has been given in this debt management strategy in a way that it is a proper oversight and a proper update to this House so that as a House, we can be able to tell the country that the number of indices in terms of debt that we are taking from different places can be able to be dealt with. And alongside that, Mr. Speaker, we cannot sit pretty on the idea of Eurobond that was floated the other day, the 1.5 billion Eurobond that was floated the other day, Mr. Speaker, because it did not come as a factor of this debt management strategy. It came as a factor of business cycle in the US, where the US government showed an interest to be able to reduce the interest rates on the dollar in the United States. And of course, that basically pushed the markets to be able to adjust. One of the observations of the committee is that that particular act
did bring some confidence to investors to be able to start putting some dollar in our economy and to bolster even tourism in our economy. But it's not a sustainable indication of stability on our foreign exchange and the value of our Kenya shillings. This is something that as a house, again, we must monitor in the next few months and ensure that it does not put us at a danger whereby we keep on borrowing more because we are borrowing against the dollar more, and that borrowing against the dollar, should any bump happen, especially after the US election, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you. Next is Senator Manzo, Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that while contributing on this very important report, that 20, and I'll be much shorter, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that there's no country in the world without debt. And in fact, there are almost many families in the world have debt, and many individuals in the world have debt. But the biggest issue is how do you manage the debt? And Mr. Speaker, we've had a very good example. The US, which is a very rich country, is heavily indebted. Israel, for a long time, has not been having debts. And if so, they are very well manageable. And the particular individuals in Israel, or business people in Israel, do not have debts. But when you come to Africa, every African country is heavily in debt. There is nothing wrong with borrowing, so long as the money, Mr. Speaker, goes to the right thing, that's the right, what it was borrowed for. Unfortunately, we've been borrowing money, and without proper structures of corruption, the country is losing a lot of money through corruption. And the barons of corruption are so, courageous that they are sure they will steal from public coffers money which is borrowed, money which taxpayers are struggling to pay. They are sure and courageous that they will go through investigation, they will sail, and even if they are taken to court, they are sure that they will still have their way and they will get away with it. And Mr. Speaker, that's where the challenge is. We really need to slay the dragon of corruption in Kenya if we are going to get anywhere with all these debts we have. And most important also, when it comes to production, Mr. Speaker, Kenya is an agricultural country. I saw a report the other day of fake fertilizer. Fertilizer being sold as stones. It means the farmer has lost money. Somebody has sold them the wrong fertilizer. And then when they go to farm, then the produce will be poor. Yet this is a country which is supposed to be producing food. What is the aftermath of it? We'll end up to borrow money to buy food to feed our people. And the circle continues, Mr. Speaker, because of corruption. There it goes on again, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to some of the mega projects. If you compare the costs of some of our major projects here with the ones in Rwanda, with the ones in Ethiopia, you find that ours are very exaggerated. And that amounts, even if it's road construction, it amounts to official corruption. There is collusion from the contractor to the engineers, so that a road which have been done with so little money, which is being done so in Australia, in other parts of the world, in Africa even, ours we pay 10 times what the others have paid. And I think if we begin dealing with that, Mr. Speaker, we are going to save a lot, such that if people can collude, then at the same time, we are paying the bills. And even delayed projects, Mr. Speaker, like Ithwaka Dam, for example. When you delay a project, it becomes more expensive. You end up paying double what the project would have costed. Kenyans still lose. We have a huge debt to pay, and Mr. Speaker, it will take a lifetime to pay. So there are many, many examples, Mr. Speaker, whereby we are losing as a country mainly because of corruption. For any country which has succeeded, they have first fought corruption completely, from Singapore to all the Asian tigers. They have, to China, even there's a death sentence for corrupt people. There is total recovery of all stolen property. In our case, that is not the way. most people are billionaires because they have stolen from the public. And Mr. Speaker, up until when we make sure that we have strengthened the fight against corruption, then it is going to be very difficult to ever pay these debts, and the country will continue to be broke. Even if people were taxed 100% and everything we worked for went into taxes, we will still not pay our debts so long as there is corruption. We will always be having a problem, and we will always face issues. And the same corruption, Mr. Speaker, results into political instability, which chases away our visitors, tourists, because the other way we earn money is through tourism. And the other result of the same corruption, Mr. Speaker, is a lot of pendy bills in the counties, Mr. Speaker. When we delay counties' money, then we delay the payments. And the more they are delayed, some people are going to court. They get huge court awards. They have interest rates. And up to when they will be executed, although there is a Government Proceedings Act, and sometimes you can never auction government, whatever these people will be paid, a lot of money would have been lost out of mismanagement, Mr. Speaker. So from the counties, you know, where there are a lot of pendy bills, where even claimants, people who have worked for the counties have done projects which you can see, which have cost them money. And even if you value and assess them, you find these people are owed money. Then, Mr. Speaker, they are delayed in payment. They go to court, they are frustrated. They get a court judgment, no one is paid. Most of them have ended up dying, leaving their children poor, and their companies collapsing, which still does not help the country. It reduces the payment of taxes, and it goes on and goes on. So, Mr. Speaker, we, as a country, we now must make a resolve to fight corruption from, you know, young children, so that it is taught in schools, morals, good values, high schools, universities, so that we have to change the whole configuration of most Kenyans, that for you to become wealthy, you must take shortcuts and you must steal from the public. Mr. Speaker, if we can manage corruption on its own, then, Mr. Speaker, we will be able to manage our affairs, our financial affairs, we will be able to manage the debts. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to a day will be zero corruption, and I look forward to a day Kenya will be a working nation, everybody motivated to work, good farming, Mr. Speaker, so that we can pay our debts and become a developed nation. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Senator William Kipkemoi, Kisan.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I also rise to support this motion, this report by the Finance and Budget Committee. Honorable Speaker, as a country, we are really in a crisis, especially because of the debt. Because if you read the report, Honorable Speaker, they say from December 2022 and compared to the current debt, Honorable Speaker, the nominal ratio to GDP is 70% from 67 because of the depreciation of the Kenya shilling. So it is, I mean, these other challenges with the economy that is also making it very difficult for the country, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, as a country, we need to manage our debt because as it is currently, it is standing at over 11 trillion. And Treasury have indicated that in the next 3, 4, 5 years, Honorable Speaker, they are going to reduce the nominal ratio from 70% to 55. So I believe, as the committee have given us an indication that by end of April this year, Honorable Speaker, Treasury will give us the policy and the way forward so that as a House, we monitor closely, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, if you also check on the local debt and external debt, one of the reasons why I believe, Honorable Speaker, our businesses are struggling, it is because the government is borrowing internally, Honorable Speaker. When they borrow internally, it means our businesses don't have access to loans. And then at the same time, the loans, because the banks are sure, they know very basically that the government is not going to default, it means they deny our businesses opportunity to borrow, and the interest rates, if you see from for the last 6, 8 months, the rates have been going up. And when the borrowing rates go up, Honorable Speaker, it becomes also expensive for the business community to drive, Honorable Speaker, to create also more opportunities for our youth, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, as a country, we need to be disciplined. I remember between around 1992, 93, Honorable Speaker, up to 2002, the Woods, the EU, US, they denied the late former President Daniel Aramoy loans and donor funds. But the country was doing well. People were able to go to school. People were able to put food on the table. We need to fight the bullet. Maybe we need to check. Because the other day we had the budget policy statement in this house, and there is a deficit of over 700 billion. Maybe we need to say for a year or 2 years, can we live within our means? Can we live within our means without doing any development? We finished what we already currently doing, and we stop borrowing, and we are not going to die. We should not borrow to buy medicine. We should not borrow to pay salaries, Honorable Speaker. If we are unable to give salary increments because we are not raising enough resources, then be it. We can stay for a year or 2 years without salary increment, Honorable Speaker, and we should be able to explain to the country, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, on also raising revenue, there are very many leakages, Honorable Speaker. If KRA and Treasury, they put in measures in place, I believe we should even be able to raise close to 3 billion, basically by ensuring there are no leakages. There is a lot of corruption, Honorable Speaker, and it's very easy. I mean, if we are willing, and you know it must start from the top to bottom, so that we know there are no leakages. If you as the father of the house, or if you as the senator or the governor, they see that there are things that you are doing that are not right, basically it will go downstream, Honorable Speaker. We need to check these things. We need to ensure governors are not giving unrealistic on-source revenue, and they create bending bills. That is one of the reasons why we are suffering other counties. A county will say they'll be able to raise $1 billion, and they raise 300 million, and they'll have budgeted for the 1 billion. What happens to 700 million works that have been committed, Honorable Speaker? So it is important that we have a conversation as a country, so that basically we come out of this mess that we're in. You know, you go to countries like Singapore, Malaysia, you know, corruption is not tolerated, Honorable Speaker. So we need to be serious. Maybe we need to be dictators. I agree, a country like China, you know, China, if you are found, I believe they said you will go through they'll hang you, Honorable Speaker. Maybe we need to do that for a year or 2 years so that we get back to our discipline. The reason why we were commenting the other time about carnage on the roads, it's because of also indiscipline, Honorable Speaker. Instead of people going to go to driving school properly, get a license, we like shortcuts. You buy driving license, you go and train on a boda in a field, within 30 minutes, you are carrying 5 passengers. How will we grow if we are not adhering to some basic discipline, basic values as a country? Honorable Speaker, I support this report, and I believe by this end of April, Treasury is going to give us the policies, the measures on how they are going to bring down the nominal ratio from 70% to 55%, the international acceptable percentage. Otherwise, technically, we're in the red, Honorable Speaker. Thank you. I support.
Thank you. Senator Tobiko, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the report of the Finance Committee on the debt management strategy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this one cannot be overstated in this country today, Mr. Speaker. That, Mr. Speaker, if Kenya manages, you know, its debts well, international debts and even the local debts, Mr. Speaker, then this country will be able to move in strides. This country will be able to uphold the dignity of its people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if there is anything that has really, you know, put pressure on Kenyans, it is the international debts that we have from all the world lenders, Mr. Speaker, the IMF, the World Bank, and all that, Mr. Speaker, the Eurobonds, Mr. Speaker. But I believe and I see, like the Kenya Kwanza government, led by the President, His Excellency William Ruto, has started on the right footing, Mr. Speaker. That we mop up our own resources, we mop up our own, finances to finance our programs so that we reduce international borrowing, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think Kenyans may feel a pinch for now, but I believe it will pay off on time, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what also ails this country, besides these international debts, it's also how these resources, after being borrowed, are spent, Mr. Speaker. There is too much, financial leakages, Mr. Speaker, in terms of corruption, Mr. Speaker, and if we address the issue of corruption, both at the national and the county levels, Mr. Speaker, then, we will see the value of the resources that we are borrowing, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as of now, a lot needs to be done. As of now, priorities needs to be put right, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, beyond just the borrowing, there are Kenyans, there are regions that feel that have mega projects because of the money that is borrowed. The tragedy is, Mr. Speaker, even if these resources are channeled towards specific regions, the rest of Kenya must pay, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, this is what I have always been saying, that, Mr. Speaker, we need equity, we need a fair distribution of these resources so that every Kenyan feels the value of what has been borrowed and also the pain of paying, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, there are those who will feel greater pain because they have not seen the projects that have been, that these resources have been used, Mr. Speaker, to do, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the expressway has become very useful in Nairobi, and I'm sure everybody feels, the value of that project. Everybody feels it has come to save us from the jam, Mr. Speaker. I just wish the expressway was extended, Mr. Speaker. Beyond Mulolongo, Mr. Speaker, maybe a little further towards Kitengela. There is a jam in Kitengela, Mr. Speaker, that is always a gridlock of around 2-3 hours, Mr. Speaker, every evening and every morning, Mr. Speaker. And yet Kitengela accommodates a lot of people who are working in Nairobi, Mr. Speaker. If only the expressway can extend a little further towards Isinya, Mr. Speaker, it will open up the area. A lot of Nairobians will go and enjoy the fresh air of Kitengela and the environs. You will have your homes there, Mr. Speaker, and we are very hospitable people, Mr. Speaker. We do accommodate all Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. I know, Mr. Speaker, there are a lot of Meru people in Kitengela, Mr. Speaker. There is the face of Kenya there, Mr. Speaker, but without the necessary infrastructure, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Tobiko, just a minute. Senator Chelagay, okay. It is not in order to stand between the speaker and the member contributing. Sure. Because you are gesturing at me when my eyes are on Senator Tobiko.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, Senator Chelagay has a lot of energy. He needs to be reined upon a little so that he's a bit orderly, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, what I was saying is that, and the environs of Kajiado, Rongai, Kiserian, Ngong, Kitengela, the open areas towards Nairobi. There is no more room in Kiambu, Mr. Speaker. There is no more room in Thika, Mr. Speaker. And yet these Nairobians want to move from the flats of Nairobi. They want to move from, the congested estates in Nairobi, Buruburu and the others. People want to own homes and own homes and compounds and, a bit of place to keep even chicken and whatever. And that room can only be found in Kajiado, Mr. Speaker. It should go to everybody in this country, every policy maker, every CS and every PS, Mr. Speaker, that Kajiado needs infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. In Kajiado, we need roads. In Kajiado, we need electricity. In Kajiado, we need access to clean water, Mr. Speaker. Fresh water, Mr. Speaker, from Ndakaini should extend to Kitengela, Mr. Speaker, and the environs, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, look, just look beyond the Wilson Airport and look beyond, Mr. Speaker. You'll see very beautiful lands. Go towards the Kiserian Pipeline Road. You'll see very beautiful lands. I know each one of you would want to own a home there. But we don't have roads, Mr. Speaker. We don't have the necessary infrastructure. That is why you're all congested in Nairobi, and there is room that could open up for you. Kajiado is part of the metropolitan, Mr. Speaker. But in this metropolitan, which I have always said, it looks like a pie. The pie is Kiambu, Murang'a, Machakos, Kajiado, and Nairobi, Mr. Speaker. But in that pie, the rest of the part of the pie has been developed. And there is a piece of the pie that has been left, Mr. Speaker. I don't know, I wonder, in these ministries, those who make the necessary policies, Mr. Speaker, to direct resources, Mr. Speaker, I don't know whether they think the resources taken towards Kajiado will be to take care of cows or human beings, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I keep looking at the social media pages in Kajiado, and it shocks me. When those who have moved from Nairobi to Kajiado are always asking for tarmac roads, Mr. Speaker, and they think it is the leadership of Kajiado that is denying them tarmac roads, Mr. Speaker. It is not. Mr. Speaker, we just need the resources distributed equitably, Mr. Speaker, so that every county can enjoy the necessary facilities. The municipalities, Mr. Speaker. Today, Kitengela is a big town, but it doesn't have sewer systems, Mr. Speaker. It is a sad story, Mr. Speaker. Even Gong and even Ronkai, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we need to develop all areas equitably so that even when we are paying for these debts, Mr. Speaker, we pay while we know where they have gone, Mr. Speaker, where they've been utilized, Mr. Speaker. Instead of telling us every day we are paying for Mau Mau roads in Kiambu and Mau Mau roads, I don't know towards where, and we have paid for these Mau Mau roads since 1963, and we are still putting tarmac roads in every village in central Kenya, in Mount Kenya, but we never have roads towards the rest of, our counties, Mr. Speaker. This is where it pains. Mr. Speaker, this is where you find some Kenyans feeling like they are not part of this country, feeling like they have been neglected, and maybe because of our numbers, Mr. Speaker, we may never be able to raise a president or a deputy president or those positions that matter, that distribute the resources, and so we keep lagging behind. Mr. Speaker, we just want to be included as part of this country, Mr. Speaker. We want roads, Mr. Speaker. Every day, Mr. Speaker, and I don't know whether you live in Kitengela, because most of you do live in Kitengela. I look at people saying, oh, we need all Namanga Road tarmacked. Oh, the former MP has not brought tarmac. I wish I could. But I was not going to use my father's cows to do the tarmacking. It is definitely the national resources to do the tarmacking. And for 10 years, I've been asking for Old Namanga Road to be tarmacked. I've been asking for Kura to come to Kitengela. It is now that they have come, Mr. Speaker, after my noise in 10 years, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, it hurts. When those who are moving from Buruburu, the middle class estates, Mr. Speaker, when they come out there and they demand that we have tarmacs, they have left tarmacs in Nairobi. Can we be given resources and the necessary infrastructure to be able to accommodate your brethren, Mr. Speaker, to be able to accommodate the rest of Kenya? If then our community does not deserve, then we have your brothers there. They are in Kitengela. The Luos, my brother Eddie, they are there in Kitengela. We have all Kenyans there. And so, Mr. Speaker, we just want to ask for, equity. We need these resources, Mr. Speaker. It pains me every day to live in Nairobi when my home is a stone throw away, but I cannot live there because we have no roads. Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to welcome you, for some mbuzi choma in my home. You will feel it, Mr. Speaker, because it's so near. I can see the lights from Nairobi, but I have no road to go home, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, also, as when we talk about our counties, I don't know whether it's corruption that was devolved to our counties, but it's a pathetic state. I agree with Senator Eddy about the pending bills in counties. It's just going to be a huge crisis very soon, Mr. Speaker, if we do not manage the pending bills, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I wish this House, because this is the House that really, oversights counties, can reign over the counties about the pending bills and the various governors about these pending bills, so that when a governor finishes his term, they should also complete together with the payments of all the pending bills of that time, Mr. Speaker, so that a governor has a chance to start on a clean slate, Mr. Speaker, so that your development is seen and maybe the development of the other person, can now comparatively be looked at, Mr. Speaker. But when you inherit pending bills, Mr. Speaker, you may spend a whole term trying to sort out pending bills of a previous regime, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I arise to support that this is good, Mr. Speaker, and we need as a country to think on the direction we are channeling our resources. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Tobiko. You have spoken so passionately on Kajiado roads. I wish, the way you have begged me, I wish I'm the one who gives out the roads. I could have commanded all the roads to be brought there from tomorrow. And also, I hope, Senator Chalage, you have noted that date in Kajiado. You remember? So thank you very much indeed, Senator Tobiko. Senator Mandago Jackson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this medium-term debt management strategy. Honorable Speaker, my concern goes to two areas, and that is on the issue of pending bills, both in national government and at the county government's level, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, as we strive to manage debt, I think it would be prudent to ensure that we also don't continue accumulating debts, particularly for county governments, Honorable Speaker, for services rendered, for goods delivered, and as a nation that is struggling to create employment, we kill the same enterprises that have grown over time, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I therefore want to propose to this House that we make recommendations to the Controller of Budget, Honorable Speaker, to ensure that the subsequent budgets in the new financial year, Honorable Speaker, before the budgets are approved, there must be clear provision of funds for clearing pending bills that have been audited and found to be genuine both in national and county governments, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, our growth in GDP cannot be achieved if we continue piling pending bills and killing the enterprises that are supposed to grow the economy, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, I strongly want to recommend and propose to this House that before the budgets of 2024-2025 are approved and funds released, there should be provisions for payments of all pending bills. Honorable Speaker, as a House, the Controller of Budget, as suggested by the Majority Leader, and all senators have followed up to support that intervention request, Honorable Speaker, that the Controller of Budget shares the reports of counties so that as Senate we are able to check on the spending of the resources. Honorable Speaker, it has been found that a number of counties are making requisitions for payments of pending bills, but the same funds are being diverted to other causes and not payment of pending bills, indicating, Honorable Speaker, that there could be a possibility of a budgeting on source revenue, and therefore the reality of the resources available vis-a-vis what has been expended cannot be met, Honorable Speaker. Number two, Honorable Speaker, as a country, in order to manage this debt, I welcome the government's move to work with private sector, both nationally and internationally, Honorable Speaker, under the public-private partnership to develop infrastructure that would require massive resources. Honorable Speaker, roads are very important for the growth of the economy of this country. And if we want to open up all parts of this country to trade, to business, to growth in terms of industry, Honorable Speaker, the role of roads cannot be underestimated. Honorable Speaker, I therefore want to support the ministries and national government decision to engage private sector, both national and internationally, in development of tolled highways in the country, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, if we take Thika Road, for example, Honorable Speaker, when Thika Road was being built, and I want to support the ministry and say that that Thika Road must be tolled, Honorable Speaker, for it to realize what it was meant for. Thika Road must be expanded all the way to Mandera and all the way to the border of Kenya and Ethiopia, Honorable Speaker, so that the goods that we are importing from Ethiopia, and for your information, Honorable Speaker, the beans we eat in this Nairobi, and probably the 60% of supply of beans to this country is actually from Ethiopia. 50% of meat supply is from those pastoralist northern areas, Honorable Speaker. We need to open up those roads, and I support the ministry that these roads must be tolled, and we must engage partners who are going to help us toll all the major highways so that we can develop these highways across the country at the same time and realize equity so that Honorable Senator Tobiko, Honorable Speaker, can also be a happy senator because the highway to Namanga has also been expanded, and therefore increasing the efficiency of transportation of goods and services from our neighboring country, Tanzania, which at the moment, Honorable Speaker, we are doing a lot of imports from Tanzania through Namanga. And with that kind of road that has a lot of congestion, the road is narrow, with the increased population that is being driven because of urbanization towards that part of the country, an expansion of that road will definitely see increase in volume of trade. So in order to also ensure equity, we want to support the national government and Ministry of Roads in implementing this tolling program of all highways. Honorable Speaker, one of the major economic corridors in this country is the Mombasa, Nairobi, Nakuru, Eldoret, Kitale, West Pokot, Turkana, all the way to South Sudan, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, if that road is to be tolled and made a four-lane highway, the time it takes to transport goods to South Sudan will reduce by 2 days, Honorable Speaker. And that means the volume of trade and the efficiency in delivery of goods will have increased, and Kenya will benefit. It has shown that every time we do a road, a number of small towns, markets begin to grow simply because goods now can reach markets. There's a lot of production in the rural parts of this country. The challenge has been, how do you move those goods to the market? And that is why cartels drive in this country, because they take advantage of the poor infrastructure network, take advantage of a farmer who cannot transport their goods to the market because of poor road networks, and therefore devalue the productivity of that farmer in the rural part of this country. While we all know that agriculture remains one of the sectors that creates the largest percentage of employment in this country, Honorable Speaker. I therefore want to support the ministry and only ask the ministry that this time round, those processes must be completely transparent. We don't want situations, Honorable Speaker, like what we witnessed in the expressway, where part of government funds have been expended in development of that infrastructure, but all the revenue that is being generated is going to a private investor, Honorable Speaker, of which we are not sure, because records have not been available to this House, whether what government invested has been subtracted from the total investments that is now being paid through the use of those roads. We also want to encourage the Ministry, Honorable Speaker, that even as they seek international partners to develop these roads, Kenyans locals with capacity should be given priority, or at least a certain percent of that investment should be reserved for Kenyan investors, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we have a very vibrant cooperative movement in this country. And if you look at the resources the cooperative sector and the cooperatives cumulatively are controlling, Honorable Speaker, it runs close to trillions of money. Given opportunity, these cooperatives can be part of those investing in this infrastructure, Honorable Speaker, so that Kenyans can also benefit from these infrastructural developments, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, finally, I want to emphasize on the issue of pending bills and say that the controller of budget, particularly for county governments, Honorable Speaker, should not release funds in the next financial year unless counties are made provision. And Honorable Speaker, there are debts that have remained unpaid in a number of counties for more than 5 years, Honorable Speaker. There is no way you would expect that enterprise to continue being in existence if their funds are going to be withheld. Not because probably that enterprise has not delivered service or goods, but simply because they did the work or delivered goods or gave service during a term of a previous governor, Honorable Speaker. The trend in this country where payments to suppliers, to business people, is hinged on which administration is in office should come to an end. Once goods and services are consumed by the public and the Auditor General are certified that indeed the expenditure was proper, then the service or the goods should be fully paid for by either level of government or government agency that has actually utilized that service, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, I want to support that we need to manage debt in this country, and we also still insist as a House, Honorable Speaker, that we still need a complete audit of all the debts that we have in this country. It is not possible that we are still paying debts that were borrowed in 60s, and we have not been given any records by National Treasury of how much of these debts we have cleared. How many debts are new? How many debts are 10 years, 40 years, 20 years old? We cannot just, Treasury cannot just be talking of debts. It is time they also provide records of these debts, because we could be servicing debts that we have already finished, Honorable Speaker. We therefore, I therefore want to ask the Treasury, even as we discuss this debt management strategy, that we shall also be demanding that we be given all the records of all debts, even if it is going to take this House 5 or 10 days to interrogate. We better begin having clean records of how much debt it is owed to who, when was it borrowed, at what rate, Honorable Speaker. Finally, Honorable Speaker, we witnessed short-term borrowing by national government, especially towards the run-up of the last general election, Honorable Speaker, where government was borrowing debts that needs to be paid in less than a year. In fact, any government borrowing debts that you need to pay in less than 6 months is equivalent to a government operating through a Shiloh, Honorable Speaker. Any sensible government should have concessional loans that you are given even time to first even invest before you begin repaying. But we want to ask Treasury that they find a way of rescheduling, renegotiating the terms of those loans so that the economy is not hard-pressed to service loans at the expense of also delivering service, Honorable Speaker. I submit.
Honorable members, there's being no other senator interested in contributing to this motion, I call upon the mover, Senator Sotsi. I have a recording here to the effect that you have got your 3 minutes in the county boundaries bill. You want to contribute to this report? Wait for the mic.
Contribute to debt management.
To debt management.
Yes.
All right. Senator Faki, resume your seat so that we allow Senator Osotsi to conclude as the last member to contribute to this report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that opportunity. You know, debt management strategy is a very, very, very important issue in this country. And therefore, this motion is equally very important to this House. Mr. Speaker, in this debt management strategy, there are 3 levels of debt. We have multilateral debt, we have bilateral debts, and we have commercial debts. The multilateral debt is about 3.1 trillion shillings, which is at least 50% of the total external debts. And the bilateral debt is about 1.4 trillion shillings, which again is 23% of the debt. And then the commercial debt is about 1.7 trillion shillings, which comprise about 27% of the debt. Mr. Speaker, I think a lot of emphasis should be put on commercial debts because they are expensive debts. And when they comprise about 27% of the total debt, that becomes a problem. And one of these debts is Eurobond. I think as a strategy, the country should seek to reduce the level of commercial debts so that the interest charged can go down significantly. Mr. Speaker, during the campaigns, the issue of public debt was one of the very, very important topics that were discussed by both sides of the political divide. And we agreed on nearly most of the things. And one of the things was that we come up with a strategy of lowering the public debt, issues like renegotiation of debt, restructuring, and all those kind of things. Mr. Speaker, we are not seeing much of that. This strategy should be talking about that as well. Domestic debt, Mr. Speaker, you have noted that the domestic debt has been going up. That's not a good sign. Because if we have an economy where domestic debt is going up, what it simply means is that you are competing as a government. You are competing with the private sector to borrow. And that leads to high interest rates. For example, Mr. Speaker, now, debts attributable to treasury bonds is about 4.2 trillion shillings. Debts attributable to treasury bills is about 565 billion shillings. Debts attributable to overdrafts and IMF special drawing rights is about 220 billion shillings. I think as a strategy, the government should focus in reducing the domestic debt so that you don't compete with the private sector in chasing debt and therefore overall affecting the development of the private sector. Mr. Speaker, allow me to talk about the whole process of engagement on, as a parliament on matters of laws or strategies around financial matters. We have just passed the budget policy statement, the BPS, which was passed by this House. And one of the most fundamental things that this House said in that policy statement was that we are going to allocate 415 billion shillings to the counties. We know that division of revenue bill is coming. We will also have an opportunity to also process the county allocation of revenue bill. Mr. Speaker, I was surprised to see yesterday that the National Assembly was debating the division of revenue bill. And that is not a good thing, because this division of revenue bill is one of those fundamental bills that hugely affect counties. And it should originate from this house, Mr. Speaker. Why would that originate from the National Assembly, that the National Assembly is able to discuss matters of division of revenue to our counties ahead of the Senate? I think something is wrong in this parliament. Something is fundamentally wrong. And we are seeing a trend where bills that affect counties hugely are now originating from the National Assembly. And we are not doing anything about it. The housing bill, the water bill, and probably many, many other bills are going to originate from the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, I said here some time back that this Senate has to wake up. We must wake up and fight for devolution in this country. Because at this rate, we are going to be partners in destroying devolution in this country. We know we belong to various sides of the political divide, the minority side and the majority side, but the most fundamental thing that should make us work for the Kenyans is Article 96 of the Constitution, which says that we exist to protect the interests of our counties. And we cannot protect the interests of our counties if we are allowing devolution to be fought using the very, very institution which is supposed to protect devolution. Mr. Speaker, even as we talk about this, we must ask ourselves very serious questions. And that is why I support that the bill, the House of Parliament bicameral bill must be processed so that we define which aspects will originate from the Senate and which aspects will originate from the National Assembly. Because we cannot allow the National Assembly to be the ones to determine for us how much will be taken to the counties. We have already said that we want 415 billion shillings to go to our counties. Let that stand. That cannot be varied in the division of revenue bill. And I want to say very clearly, the only house that has the powers to determine how much will go to the counties is the Senate. Some 2 weeks back, Mr. Speaker, I was in a function where a commissioner for Commission for Revenue Allocation stood up, and in the presence of Senator Cheregei and myself, that commissioner said, we are going to give counties this amount of money. And I asked her, you do not have powers to give. The powers to give is the Senate. You only recommend. And we can decide to go with your recommendation or reject your recommendation. So people are misusing the powers to give resources to our counties. The power are at the Senate. And even National Assembly, as they discuss division of revenue bill, they must not interfere with what we have proposed in the BPS, that we want 415 billion shillings to go to our counties. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to go further than that, but all to say that management of debt in this country is the most important aspect of our economic management, and a lot of emphasis must be put in ensuring that this country is able to live within its means. And one of the things that contribute to high increases in debt is when you try to come up with ambitious budgets. Then you have a budget deficit. When you have a budget deficit, where do you get the money? You either tax people, but you cannot continue taxing people anymore. You will go and borrow. So even with this budget that we are proposing, I don't see how they are going to manage the issue of debt here. They will still be forced to go and borrow so that they can manage the budget deficit. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I support.
I now call upon Senator Faki to reply to the motion.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii kujibu mswada huu ambao ni muhimu sana katika bunge letu la Senate na kitaifa kwa jumla. Kwanza Mheshimiwa Spika, ningependa kuchukua fursa hii kuwapongeza na kuwashukuru maseneta wote ambao wamechangia mswada huu, wakiongozwa na kiongozi wa wengi katika bunge hili, Mheshimiwa Senator Cheriot, Senator Sifuna, Senator Olekina, Senator Uroba, Senator Eddie Okecha ambaye pia ni mwanachama wa kamati ya fedha, Senator Maanzo, Senator Kisang, Senator Tobiko ambaye amezungumza kwa hamasa kubwa, Senator Mandago ambaye pia alikuwa ni governor wa gatuzi la Uasin Gishu, na mwisho Senator Usosi. Mheshimiwa Spika, la msingi ni kwa japokuwa dhiki ya deni imepungua kwa sasa, lakini bado iko hatari ya dhiki hiyo kurejea tena, kwa sababu tuliona kwamba kwanza serikali ilisema kwamba italipa ile deni ya Eurobond kufikia Disemba mwaka uliokwisha, lakini hawakuweza kulipa, na walipopata mkopo mwingine mwezi huu wa pili, tuliona kwamba wamepata mkopo wa dola bilioni 1.5, wakati deni lote la Eurobond ni bilioni 2. Mheshimiwa Spika, ilikuwa ni bilioni 2. Kwa hivyo japokuwa malipo yatafanywa kwa wakati, lakini hili swala la dhiki ya deni, Mheshimiwa Spika, yani debt distress, ni kitu ambacho kitaendelea kuwa katika shingo yetu kwa muda mrefu utakaokuja. Mheshimiwa Spika, mapendekezo yaliyotoa maseneta wote ni mapendekezo ya kufaa, Mheshimiwa Spika, kuhusiana na vipi bajeti yetu itakavyokuwa. Mheshimiwa Spika, tumeona kwamba kutakuwa na mapungufu ya dola bilioni 703.9 katika bajeti ya mwaka huu. Na hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, mapungufu hayo yataweza kufadhiliwa na madeni ya kutoka nje ya 55% na vile vile madeni kutoka ndani ya 45%. Mheshimiwa, katika madeni yatokayo ndani ni kwamba serikali itakuwa inapingana na wananchi na wafanyabiashara katika kupata fedha za kufanya maendeleo ama kuziba pengo lile ambalo liko, na hiyo itasababisha mkurupuko wa bei wa riba katika nchi yetu, na vile vile mkurupuko huo utasaidia pia kuongeza bei za bidhaa katika nchi yetu, kwa sababu fedha itakuwa wafanyabiashara ama benki nyingi zitakuwa za kopesha serikali kuliko kopesha wananchi, ambapo itakuwa ni shida kuweza kupata malipo hayo. Mheshimiwa Spika, Senator Sifuna alichangia kusema kwamba tumepuuza mapendekezo ya ISPAC, lakini hiyo si kweli Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa sababu mapendekezo yote tumeweza kuyajadili na kuyaweka katika ripoti ile, na kwamba hatukuweza kuchukua pendekezo lile kama pendekezo la kamati, sio kwamba tumeweza kupuuza mapendekezo ambayo yametolewa. Mheshimiwa Spika, swala la ufadhili wa kutoka kwa watu binafsi, yani public private partnership, ni swala ambalo tumejadili hata wakati wa bunge lililopita. Mheshimiwa Spika, wakati tulipokuwa tunaangalia mabadiliko ya debt ceiling, yani kwa Kiingereza, yani mabadiliko ya juu ya deni, tuliangalia masuala ambayo serikali ilikuwa imependekeza, na moja ya pendekezo ambalo lilikuja na serikali ni kwamba wameweza kupitisha sheria ya ile tunaita public private partnership, kwamba miradi sasa ya serikali inaangaliwa kwanza, inapelekwa katika msingi ya public private partnership. Waangalie kama wanaweza kupata mfadhili wa kuweza kufanya mradi ule ili aweze kujilipa polepole. Na Mheshimiwa Spika, Nairobi Expressway ni moja ya miradi ambayo imefanyika, na kwa kweli tunaweza kusema ni mradi ambao umefaulu, kwa sababu tumeona malengo yametimia na vile vile wananchi wanalipa bila ya kulalamika kwa njia yoyote. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, cha kustaajabisha ni kwa serikali hii ilipochukua mamlaka ilijaribu kupuuza ile miradi ya nyuma yote ambayo ilikuwa imepangwa ama mikakati ambayo imeweka kuweza kuhakikisha kwamba ile sheria inaweza kutumika na kufaidi wananchi. Na nimefurahi Mheshimiwa Spika kwamba sasa wanajaribu serikali inajaribu kuchukua mbinu hii ya kuleta maendeleo katika nchi yetu ya Kenya, kwa sababu ni njia ambayo itasaidia kupunguza ile dhiki ama pressure ambayo inatokana na upungufu wa fedha ambazo serikali iko nayo kwa sasa, ili kuhakikisha kwamba tunapata maendeleo. Mheshimiwa Spika, miradi mingi inaweza kufanya kwa njia hii ya ufadhili wa kibinafsi ili kupunguza madeni na pia kupunguza na kuweka pesa katika nyanja ambayo itakuwa zinazalisha kwa haraka zaidi kuliko vile ambavyo zinazalishwa kwa miradi ambayo inachukua muda mrefu. Mheshimiwa Spika, vile vile tumependekeza katika ripoti hii na nafurahi maseneta wengi wamechangia kuwe na ripoti za mara kwa mara zinazokuja hapa kutoka kwa hazina kuu, kwa sababu tumeona kwamba tukishaletewa ripoti kama hii ama mswada kama huu wa kuangalia mipango ya madeni na mikopo ya serikali, hatuangalii tena Mheshimiwa Spika mpaka mwisho wa mwaka ujao. Mwaka ujao ndio tutaletewa tena mwezi wa pili tarehe 15 tutaletewa nyingine medium term debt strategy kuiangalia tena upya. Lakini hatuna ufuatilizi Mheshimiwa Spika kuhakikisha kwamba yale ambayo yamependekezwa na serikali yanatekelezwa na kuhakikisha kwamba deni inabakia chini ya 55%. Mheshimiwa Spika, tulikubali mwaka jana kubadilisha mfumo wa deni kutoka kwa kile kiwango cha trilioni 10 ambacho kiwango cha juu cha trilioni 10 ambacho kilikuwako, na tukasema kwamba tuifanye kuwa ni asilimia ya mazao katika nchi, yani GDP. Lakini Mheshimiwa Spika, hatari ya hiyo ni kwamba kwa sasa tuko asilimia 67.9 na kuna uwezekano ya kwenda juu, kwa sababu tumewapa serikali mpaka mwaka wa 2028 na 2029 ndio iweze kupungua na kufika asilimia 55. Kwa hivyo kwa huu muda ambao uko sasa Mheshimiwa Spika, inaweza kwenda kwa njia yote, inaweza kupanda, inaweza kushuka. Na hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika ni hatari kwa sababu tumewapa, kwa mfano tumesema tumewapa serikali a blank check Mheshimiwa Spika, ili kuona kwamba wanaweza kukopa bila ya kizuizi chochote. Kwa hiyo ndio tukasema Mheshimiwa Spika kwamba ni lazima kila baada ya miezi mitatu hazina kuu ilete ripoti hapa katika bunge hili la kuhakikisha kueleza kiwango cha deni kimefika wapi. Mheshimiwa Spika, Seneta Mandago alizungumzia kuhusiana na orodha ya madeni ambayo tutadaiwa. Mheshimiwa Spika, hiyo ni muhimu sana kwa sababu tumeona kuwa madeni mengi labda mengine yalichukuliwa kwa wakati wa uhuru miaka 60 iliyopita Mheshimiwa Spika, na labda bado tunayalipa madeni hayo. Mheshimiwa Spika, madeni mengine yalichukuliwa lakini hakuna mradi uliofanyika. Kwa mfano deni la Kimwarer na Aror Dam Mheshimiwa Spika, ambapo hata rais wakati alipokuwa naibu wa rais alisema alikubali kwamba bilioni 7 zimepotea. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, bilioni 7 sio pesa kidogo, kwa sababu tumeona kwamba kaunti zetu kama kwa mfano kaunti ya Mombasa mwaka mzima inapewa bilioni 7 kutoka kwa hazina kuu, yani ile inaitwa shareable revenue. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, lazima hii orodha ya madeni ije hapa ili tuweze kuangalia deni hili lilichukuliwa kwa mradi gani, deni hili lilichukuliwa kwa mradi gani, ili kila deni ambalo limeweza chukuliwa kwa niaba ya Wakenya tumeweza kulijua ni kwa sababu gani na pesa hizo zilifanya nini. Mheshimiwa Spika, kulikuwa na tuhuma hapa kwamba hii Eurobond ya kwanza ilipochukuliwa pesa hazikuja katika nchi ya Kenya. Na tuhuma hizo Mheshimiwa Spika hazikuweza kujibiwa. Kwa hivyo iwapo tutaiona orodha ya madeni Mheshimiwa Spika, tutaweza kuamua kwamba je, ililetwa Kenya ama haikuletwa Kenya. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, mwisho ni kuwa maseneta pia wamezungumzia masuala ya ufisadi. Mheshimiwa Spika, ufisadi hatuwezi kuufungia macho kwa sababu ni kitu ambacho kinaathiri. Ufisadi katika serikali kuu, ufisadi katika serikali zetu za kaunti. Serikali nyingi za kaunti Mheshimiwa Spika, kila serikali ina madeni, ina malumbukizi ya madeni kwa sababu hawajaweza kulipa wanakandarasi kwa wakati unaofaa. Mheshimiwa Spika, hii inasababisha kucheleweshwa kwa maendeleo katika kaunti zetu na vile vile pia kuendelea kulumbukiza madeni kila mwaka nenda mwaka rudi. Kwa serikali kuu Mheshimiwa Spika, pia madeni ni hao. Asubuhi waziri wa barabara alikuwa hapa akisema kwamba kuna madeni ya bilioni 150 kwa wizara ya kwa masala ya barabara peke yake. Yani Kena, Kura na Kera wana madeni ya bilioni 150 ambayo inadaiwa. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, hii ina maana kwamba kila mwaka tutakuwa tunaendelea kulumbukiza madeni, ambao madeni haya Mheshimiwa Spika hayatasaidia, kwa sababu jambo la kwanza ambalo pato la serikali linastahili kufanya ni kulipa deni. Na ikiwa madeni ni mengi, ina maana kwamba pesa za maendeleo zitapungua, na ikiwa pesa za maendeleo zimepungua, ina maana kwamba hatutapata yale maendeleo ambayo tunayatarajia katika nchi yetu. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, ufisadi ni lazima serikali hii ijitolee kupambana na ufisadi. Mheshimiwa Spika, mpaka sasa ishara walizotoa Mheshimiwa Spika ni kwamba hawako tayari kupambana na ufisadi, kwa sababu kesi nyingi ambazo zilikuwa zimepelekwa mahakamani zote Mheshimiwa Spika zimeondolewa, na hii inawavunja moyo wale wachunguzi wa kesi hizi za ufisadi. Iwapo watapata nafasi nyingine ya kufanya uchunguzi, Mheshimiwa Spika, sidhani kama watakuwa na hamu na ghamu ya kuweza kufanya uchunguzi ule, kuhakikisha kwamba wale ambao wanatuhumiwa wameweza kupelekwa mahakamani na hatimaye kupatikana na hatia. Kwa hiyo mengi Mheshimiwa Spika, nawashukuru tena na nashukuru bunge hili kwa kutupa fursa ya kuleta ripoti hii muhimu katika mfumo wa fedha wa nchi yetu. Asante Mheshimiwa Spika.
Senator Faki. You're the mover.
Mheshimiwa Spika, ningeomba kuwa tuhairishe kupigiwa kura kwa swala hili kuambatana na kifungu cha 66(3) cha kanuni za bunge hili. Asante sana.
Honorable Senators, voting on this particular motion shall be deferred to the next sitting. I call upon the clerk to call upon the next order.
Order number 9, the County Boundaries Bill, Senate Bills number 6 of 2023. Second reading, resumption of debate interrupted on Tuesday, 5th March, 2024.
Honorable Senators, debate on this particular bill was interrupted on 5th of March, and as at that time, the Honorable Senator Osotsi was on the floor, and you still have got a balance of 3 minutes to conclude on your contribution to the bill. Proceed, Senator Osotsi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stopped at the point where I was saying that the bill is a good thing that has happened. We have made several attempts to address this issue in parliaments of the past, but nothing has come out. We have received so many petitions, either in this parliament or in our various offices, about matters to do with boundary review. But the the boundary area that has attracted a lot of interest, a lot of petitions, is Maseno-Vihiga boundary. And Vihiga that I represent, I have received numerous requests from the people who stay around the Maseno area that they would like that matter to be addressed. And that matter does not just affect the boundary, but also other institutions. For example, the church, hospitals, roads. There have been some of the issues that have come up. Mr. Speaker, I am very optimistic that with this bill, this long-standing problem that we have had will be addressed. But I had suggested that the bill should not just focus on one scenario. That is the scenario of boundary review. It should also look at the worst case scenario. That what if the review does not happen? Because we know that this matter of boundary review is going to be a hotly contested issue. How do we move forward So they must look at also scenario B, which in my view is if the issue of boundary cannot be resolved, let us look at the issue of provision of services. Let us look at the issue of revenue share. Let us look at the issue of sharing in infrastructure. Let us look at the issues of religion and all that. Because I'm saying this, Mr. Speaker, because a lot of revenue that Maseno gets, which is in Kisumu, emanate from Vihiga County.
Senator Osotsi, your 3 minutes has since been consumed by your contribution. So I will invite the honorable members who've requested from the dashboard to speak to this bill, and Senator Manzo Daniel Kitonga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I really want to thank Senator Moses Kajwang for having brought this bill back. Mr. Speaker, the County Boundaries Bill 2023 was previously County Boundaries Bill 2022, and it was caught up with parliamentary time. It had been moved by the now Governor of Makueni, who was then Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr. Mr. Speaker, the County Boundaries Bill has tried to put together and synchronize the boundaries of the counties in Kenya, bearing in mind that, just as has been said by Honorable Osotsi, there has been very many petitions, there has been very many complaints on boundaries, and especially when it comes to levies, and again also when it comes to, Mr. Speaker, police stations. And mainly the jurisdiction of dealing with the boundaries is done by the independent boundaries, the IBC. And right now, unfortunately, we don't have IBC in Kenya. We don't have the commissioners. The rest of the structure remains. And without the commissioners, Mr. Speaker, there are no boundaries which can be reviewed or synchronized. And therefore, Mutula Kilonzo Jr. came up with this bill, which has now been adopted by the Honorable Moses Otieno Kajwang, word by word, other than his name. And therefore, I raise to support it and say that it is seeks, under its section 52, it seeks to repeal Cap 105A, which is the District and the Provinces Act. This act is the one which laid the districts as in 1992. And when the new constitution was being made, that is what was followed, Mr. Speaker, to come up with the new counties, the 47 counties we have today. And unfortunately, there has been many issues, especially in many borders. At times, people are lost, Mr. Speaker, as to, you know, although this is highly determined by the chief, you know, the administrative boundaries, you know, the county commissioners, RAIM, and again also the wards and the sub-wards. And then again also where a member of county assembly is elected guides, because the police stations do guide the borders. And one of the things which has been in dispute are police stations, the other ones are markets. And I want to bring it closer home. And before I do that, I want to state that the Honorable Mutula Kilonzo and now Kajwang then went on to define each district as of the 1992 situation when the Districts and the Provinces Act applied. And he has gone on to look at the borders as they were then in 1992 for the 47 counties, and has gone on to describe border of county by county. And that's why this, this act, this county boundaries bill has 285 pages, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, because it is something I'm familiar with, I may not take full time required, but I want to deal with the Makueni case, whereby, Mr. Speaker, we have a border dispute between Makueni County and Taita Taveta County. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to state that many people in Makueni County and in Taita Taveta County have migrated vice versa. There are many people settled in Taita Taveta County originally from Makueni, and there are many people settled in Makueni originally from Taita Taveta County. And one of the border disputes or towns has been Mutituandei town. The status of Mutituandei town is that some matter was filed in court by 3 residents of Mutituandei who complained, you know, without justification, that they, in fact, they themselves wanted to pay levies of the county to Taita Taveta, yet they're in Makueni County. And the court matter, when it went to Mombasa courts, it was decided that the court moved itself and stated that it had no jurisdiction to deal with the matter, referred the matter to the National Land Commission. The National Land Commission was unable to deal with the matter for lack of jurisdiction and was sent back to the courts. And the courts then decided to deal with the matter of the levies alone. And when it dealt with that particular matter alone, it was not able to proceed since there is no IBC, as the right jurisdiction falls with IBC. So the courts have no jurisdiction. The National Land Commission has no jurisdiction. It is only IBC who have jurisdiction. And therefore, recently when the Cabinet Secretary for Interior was in Makueni, particularly Kambo, dealing with the new district which actually touches Mutituandei and touches that particular border, set up a committee of the 2 county commissioners and their administrators therein to sit in the next 2 weeks from that time, meaning now we have 1 week to go, so that they can come up with the actual borders between Makueni and Taita Taveta. So the county commissioner of Taita Taveta and the county commissioner of Makueni, and many other, you know, associated people to come up with a committee which has already been set up to be able to arbitrate this particular matter. But the truth of the matter is that the border dispute between Makueni and Taita Taveta is a nullity. There isn't any border dispute. The chief of Mutituandei reports to the county commissioner of Makueni County. The OCS of Mutituandei reports to the commander of Makueni County. The ward Mutituandei, the elected MCA there, is of Makueni County, and he sits in the Makueni County Assembly. He's a deputy speaker, in fact. And the police stations there, all of them vote at Makueni County. At no point have they ever voted at Taita Taveta County. But we are very keen on this particular matter, myself and the senator for Taita Taveta County, in that we do not want these very friendly counties to go into any dispute at all in a matter which does not exist in the first place. We want harmony because, as I've said, most of the people have moved from Makueni to Taita Taveta, and people have moved from Taita Taveta and trade in Mutituandei, knowing very well that they are trading in Makueni. And therefore, it is just 1 or 2, in fact 3 people who brought this matter and by their own volition wanted to pay taxes to another county, levies of the county, but not Makueni County. And therefore, I would like to state clearly that that particular dispute is really a nullity, but we just want this team, which has been set up recently, to come up with an answer as quickly as possible, and that will be reported to have settled the matter in court. In fact, in that particular matter in court, which has hearing dates, we have gotten one of the best lawyers in Eastern region, a senior counsel, Eric Mutua, who was one time the chairperson of the Law Society of Kenya, to deal with the matter, and is dealing with it competently. But should this act also pass before all those are concluded, then we'll go by the boundaries put in this act of parliament, And I believe that will settle the matter once and for all so that our people can live in harmony. We are very keen that the two counties coexist peacefully and that no one should come to Mutitwandei, which is in Makueni, and claim that it is in any other place. At the same time, people have tried to politicize, come out with fake newspapers, printings that the cause has already determined. You know, all this is really people who want to cause trouble between counties which have been existing very peacefully. And you know, that sort of idea is actually criminal. And that person should be dealt with, you know, in the appropriate manner. A criminal is dealt with so that we can settle peacefully and people can coexist. Mr. Speaker, again on this particular matter, on the other side of Taita Taveta, the last police station is somewhere in the park, and it is even kilometers away from Mutitwandei. And when they do public participation, that's where the governor of Taita Taveta ends. There's no single time the governor of Taita Taveta ever did, in the last 12 years or so, ever did public participation in Mutitwandei. And therefore, this particular sort of disputes are duplicated in numerous other counties. And this act will settle the matter once and for all. And therefore, it is imperative that this law, which has really been designed very carefully and thoughtfully, will settle disputes in many counties, including Makueni and Mutitwandei. And I would like to urge the residents of those two counties really to wait for the outcome of this act, wait for the outcome of the committee set recently by the Minister in charge of Interior, and also considerably in the event the courts proceed with the matter, whatever will be the outcome of the courts. And therefore, no single person of Makueni has been levied from Taita Taveta, and no single person has been denied to do business. And anybody having a doubt, then they can go to Mutitwandei and make inquiries into all business premises there. They will find that there is no one who has come to give trouble to anybody. Only people who don't wish the two counties well have been brewing trouble, which is totally unnecessary. Mr. Speaker, I really want to support all this which had been proposed before, which have been debated very well, which has a very good schedules, and which comes up with data and historical border systems of these two counties. I want to submit and say that I support, and I look forward to this law be passed so that the matter can be settled once and for all. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I submit.
Thank you, Senator Manzo. Senator Okech Eddie. Senator Okech, proceed to.
Mr. Speaker, you know, Chirage is looking at me with a very unusual eyes, so I don't know what is going on, but it's okay. I feel protected, Mr. Speaker, and especially because it's the evening. Chirage is not as dangerous in the evening as he is during the start of the session. Mr. Speaker, this is indeed a wonderful bill, and I think that if you read the Constitution, Chapter 6 of the Constitution starts by defining the territory of our country, Mr. Speaker, purely in the context of counties. And it is furthered in Schedule 1, whereby the counties that today we enjoy being part of in our respective capacities, Mr. Speaker, are well enumerated in Schedule 1 from number 1 to number 47, Mr. Speaker. And the challenge with the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, is that the idea of the boundaries of those territorial units in our larger territory called Kenya, Mr. Speaker, were not well defined. And I want to belabor much to say that The definition of that was furthered by the use of the Districts and Province Act of 1992, and to be specific, Cap 105, in which the boundaries then that were used in terms of determining the boundaries of counties, which were previously those districts under the said act, Mr. Speaker, were not satisfactory, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, it is natural that the issue of boundaries are always going to emanate. And to be specific, Mr. Speaker, solving such an issue becomes very complex because there is one issue of determining what is actually the boundary of a county. And then there's the issue of altercations that comes with altering those boundaries because of different issues, Mr. Speaker. And I find this bill amazingly placed in the context of even being able to help our countries, Mr. Speaker, to define what their borders are, Mr. Speaker. You've seen, I remember that last year, Mr. Speaker, one of the biggest confrontations that we had in this House was the issue of Sondu versus the issue of Kericho, Mr. Speaker, where, if you remember very well, my brother, Senator Boni Alwali of Kakamega, together with yours truly, Eddie Okech, had a small confrontation on the loss of lives in Sondu, Mr. Speaker. And the loss of lives in Sondu, Mr. Speaker, was in such a way that the people between Kisumu and Kericho have been fighting over what actually constitutes the boundary of those two counties, Mr. Speaker. And sometimes these disputes, Mr. Speaker, these disputes come with an economic excitement and an economic interest, Mr. Speaker, because if you look at somewhere like Sondu, Mr. Speaker, it's one of the most performing markets in that particular region. And you will find that sometimes the issues such as who collects the local revenues in this particular border center that then attract serious economic activity and economic arrangement in that particular community, Mr. Speaker, then it becomes an endemic fight that will always continue, Mr. Speaker. So this particular bill seeks to put together a good framework, a legal framework that can be able to allow people to sit and be able to address these things. For example, Mr. Speaker, we know that under Article 188 that has been quoted here a number of times, actually that article does not necessarily suggest that the dispute of boundaries will be sorted by IEBC. You know, IEBC comes in boundaries review. But before review, Mr. Speaker, is the question of where do I belong as a person from Kisumu, or where do I belong as a person from Kericho? Even most recently, where do I belong as a person from Kisii, if I'm from Kisii, vis-a-vis, or where do I belong as a person from Nyamira if I'm from Nyamira? To the extent that that question, that fundamental question of what actually is the boundary of a county comes to place, that comes before IBC can be able to review the boundary. So before we talk about boundary review, Mr. Speaker, that basic definition, this bill seeks to address it by establishing what it calls the Independent Counties Boundaries Commissions. And that commission, Mr. Speaker, is definitely in line with Article 188 of the Constitution, because Article 188 of the Constitution does not refer to IBC as the fundamental institution to be able to solve the issue of boundaries. But it actually does refer to any independent commission that can be formed using a parliamentary process, such as this that Senator Kajwang has rightfully put together in this bill to be able to help us rethink the issues of boundaries, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, this is very important because if you think about it, Mr. Speaker, the nature of our boundaries that were drawn under the Act of the 1992 Act, Mr. Speaker, the Districts and Provinces Act, the physical features or the landmarks that were used at that time, Mr. Speaker, have since changed. Many things have changed if you think about it from 1992 to today, Mr. Speaker. In 1992, Mr. Speaker, I remember that there was the Rio Conference or the Rio Summit that sought to
bring to the attention of the world and even make to some grassroots communities the idea of climate change issues, Mr. Speaker. At that time, nobody took climate change very seriously because it was an issue that had just come in 1998 through one NASA scientist called Johnson, who actually brought this to the Senate of the United States, that climate change was becoming a major issue that needed to be addressed. And if you look at the case for investment on climate change, Mr. Speaker, since 1992 to date, there hasn't been a robust investment to be able to deal with the problems of climate change. Now, Mr. Speaker, you can imagine that between 1992 to date, if a child was born in 1992, they are probably 30 years old by now, or 31 years old by now. Within 32 years, Mr. Speaker, many things have happened in terms of delineation of a physical feature that defined boundaries at that time, Mr. Speaker. If, for instance, a river that used to be seasonal, that was being used as a feature at that time, was used in the district boundaries marking and even redistricting in that era, Mr. Speaker, then definitely by now, Mr. Speaker, that river no longer exists. So that even if you used it to say that District X, that then became Boundary Y in the current arrangement, was using that river, Mr. Speaker, then now you can't even imagine where that river exists. And this will lead to serious, perpetual conflicts after conflict after conflict, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, having such a legal mechanism as what is proposed in this bill, Mr. Speaker, is the right way to go, and is also the best way to go, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that the dispute that we are seeing in county boundaries, Mr. Speaker, is solved. Another big part of this bill, Mr. Speaker, I think is under part 4 and 5, Mr. Speaker, of this bill, is being very explicit on the process and the persona of the people who can be able to propose the the review of boundaries and even alteration of boundaries, Mr. Speaker. I think that the bill has attempted to define very well the people who can be able to propose those alterations, Mr. Speaker. It gives the power to the individuals in terms of any person within a county, but then more specifically, it gives people like MCAs who live in our grassroots communities the power to be able to review boundaries by being able to propose and petition in Parliament, and especially Senate, because most of these boundaries issues are going to affect counties, and therefore this is the house where they can be able to highlight such a things. Mr. Speaker, it gives even the senators of this house the power to be actually able to petition for a review of a boundary in the context of alteration of a boundary, Mr. Speaker. And I found that to be a genius, Mr. Speaker, because other than that, the issue of alteration of boundaries has been a political issue. If you think about it, it is where, for instance, governors who sometimes have got the interest of being able to collect some small revenue in the small markets that are within our boundaries, Mr. Speaker, are then the people who end to charge people in an emotive political narratives on what constitutes their boundaries or not. But this bill addresses this very well by making sure that there is a proper process, there's a proper definition of individuals who can be able to propose for boundary review, and more importantly, there is a proper channel with which the commissions under Part 5, the Independent County Boundaries Commission, can be able to be to solidly deliberate on that particular process, Mr. Speaker. I think that the spirit of this bill, Mr. Speaker, should also be able to help us question such things as whether the counties that we have right now are enough counties, Mr. Speaker. I have held the view that the more devolved units we have in this country, the better off we are as a country. In fact, I hold the view that places like Kuria, where I come from, the Kuria districts of that time and the Kuria sub-county that we have right now, given their functions at the border of the country, and given their functions to our community, and given the population that they have right now, the courier should be given a county, Mr. Speaker. Because when courier is given a county, it does not take away from Migori County. It adds to Migori County, because when courier gets a county and Migori County, the current Migori County gets something like 12 billion, and courier also gets 12 billion, Mr. Speaker, then it means that more resources are dissolved to go to the counties, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Senators, we may rise. It is now 6:30 p.m., time to adjourn the Senate. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until tomorrow, Thursday, 21st of March, 2024 at 2:30 p.m. When this bill is back in the order paper, Senator Okech, you will have 8 more minutes to contribute to it.